Welcome to this omnibus edition of Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined and now feature-length Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Haydock, watch a Doctor Who story chosen by a friend of mine. I commentate, I drop in facts and observations, and try to guess what their favourite thing about each episode might be.
Hi, I'm Erica Lear, and I'm part of the Doctor Who Appreciation Society, and I also run my own Doctor Who conventions in the Northwest with the help of my long-suffering husband Alan. The story I've chosen for Toby's amazing podcast is the Caves of Androzani, which is a big favourite of mine. Now I've been briefed to choose favourite moments from episodes, from the episodes of Caves. So here we go.
Hello and welcome to Happy Times and Places, a jolly location where I try to accentuate the positive about Doctor Who, and it has occasionally been levelled at me that I often on the side of choosing obscure or not well-liked stories. That could be true, but you see, every story is a favourite of someone, and that's kind of the point. And I personally prefer it when I dip into other podcasts that talk about Doctor Who stories, like, for example, A Hamster with a Blunt Penknife, which I very much enjoy, or a wheezing, groaning sound, which is hilarious. I'm very interested when they sort of pick over the less digested stories. But popular stories are popular for a reason, because they're good and people like them, and perhaps people like listening to people talking about them. So, and everyone gets its moment in the sun, so I'm going to go for a story that, in the correct manner of Doctor Who stories, would be called the blowholes of Androzani Minor, and it's the Caves of Androzani, which, as you heard, has been chosen by Erica Edgerton, who is a lovely woman who is as mad as a bag of spanners. And I mean mad in a good way, not in a way that she'd, stalk you and cook your pet rabbit, but mad in a kind of, which she's just bonkers, but good fun, and also has a heart. What Cheryl Lee, my partner, would describe Erica as somebody who has a good soul, and both her and her husband Alan have been very nice to me over the years, and she also does sterling work with organising the Who at Hoylake Convention, and also the work that she does for DWAS. So she has chosen, both her and Alan were people I asked very early in the process, and they responded very early. So the reason Caves of Androzani has come so late is because I have held off. So maybe it's me that has a problem with popular stories, and I want to be talking about the less popular, the less obvious ones, because Alan and I was kind of like, oh, come on, guys, because I was always impressed when people chose a less popular story, a more interesting prospect for me. See, I'm giving myself away. Erica and Alan went for The Caves of Androzani and The Curse of Fenric, respectively, and I've not got round to either, because I was kind of, well, it's obvious what's good about them, but if it's obvious, I have to say it. And sometimes things that I think are obvious then turn out to be a surprise to other people, because things are only obvious if you think them. So let's see if what I like about the Caves of Androzani chimes with what Erica likes about the Caves of Androzani, and indeed chimes like the incidental music heralding the regeneration of Peter Davison, with what you like about the Caves of Androzani. Erica, I'll give you the heads up on this, has a rather, having said she's not mad in a stalkery way, she is rather too obsessed with Peter Davison for, I think, to allow the description of sane to apply to Erica and not have any of those involved sued in the Trades Descriptions Act. She's got a thing about Davison, shall we say? So I would be hugely surprised if any of the things that she chooses are not related to Peter Davison. I'm not going to let that affect my judgment. I wouldn't be surprised if Erica went, my favourite thing about episode 1 is Peter Davison. My favourite thing about episode 2 is Peter Davison. I love my Peter. But let's see. My favourite thing about episode 3 is Peter Davison. But let's see. I only say this because I feel like this is friendly joshing. So let's see what I find to talk about the Davison of the Peter Davison of Androzani, and we'll check in with Erica at the end of each episode. I'm going to press play in 3, 2, 1. Now then, I didn't see these episodes when they went out because I had been sent away to boarding school, not because I was posh, in fact the opposite, but it may be where I picked up some of my enunciations. A charity paid for me to go and sleep at a school because Mum couldn't get me to and from the local school every day because she had to go back to work and worked miles away and had to be up early and couldn't do the transport, etc, etc. Anyway, the reason this is relevant is because the local vicar had a video, and he would video Doctor Who for me, and then my mum on a Sunday, which is one of the 2 half days I was at home every week, I would go to the vicar's, thank you Reverend Michael Harding, and watch on his video, because not many people had videos in those days, the Doctor Who episodes of the week. But for some reason we had to do something, or he was away the weekend of episodes 1 and 2 of Caves of Androzani, so I watched it all in one go as an omnibus. So this has always felt a bit like a sort of Sunday afternoon movie to me, and it's got the feel of that as a production as well. But it's always had that kind of vibe to it. I feel sorry for Nicola Bryant because I've heard people give her stick for her pronunciation of the word glass, which she is clearly ribbing Doctor Who with that pronunciation. And it is because when they filmed this, they didn't know that the scene in the TARDIS, which was going to be done in the studio, where he refers to glass bottles, was going to be cut. And so presumably when they'd done that, the read-through or rehearsals or whatever, or talked about it at least, he was going to pronounce it glass, so she was going to then do this bit glass. And it's why this joke doesn't quite work, because we don't have the context. And they have done a bit of dubbing as the TARDIS lands with some of the lines that would have been in that TARDIS scene. But I see sometimes people use it as a stick to beat Nicola Bryant with for her non-American pronunciation of glass, which seems to me, even without the stuff around it, it seems to me, even without the context, the performance is suggesting that she is ribbing the Doctor's pronunciation. But Doctor Who fans will never pass up an opportunity to tell you you've done something wrong, even if you haven't done something wrong. So solidarity, Nicola Bryant, who is excellent in this story. This is a lovely shot here that we have, and obviously there's the mat at the background, which was slightly wobblier on transmission than it is on the stabilized versions. I don't know how you feel about that. I don't mind a wobbly horizon myself, but also I'm not over worried about that stabilization either. It's a great quarry location, but and yes, it's they're not caves, they're blowholes. It's not Androzani, it's Androzani Minor. It's one of my amusing things that amuses me, that it's a story that isn't called what it actually is. Graham Harper is, of course, the big news with this story. It's his first one as director. Amazing that your first one, you get the kind of season climax. I know we have Colin Baker's debut as the actual climax of the season, but it doesn't feel like that in terms of what that production is like. But we'll talk about that when we get to the Twin Dilemma. This definitely feels like where everything sort of climaxes with this season. And we have, of course, in a perfect Doctor Who story, brilliantly directed, brilliantly acted, brilliantly written, we have to have a bit that's naff, and it's the becloaked bat monster. Oh, it's not as bad. Have they reduced the micro? I think is it called microphony? The interference caused by machine gun fire that gives it that Venetian blind effect, which is the machine gun fire interfering with the electronics in the studio, which is why machine guns are problematic. I like that. And isn't this brilliant? Nice sort of polished surface. Nice caves here. They seem like sort of shiny stone. This is so we've had the machine guns. That's Graham Harper going, don't want lasers, I want machine guns. That I think automatically gives it quite a grown-up feel. And this I think is wonderful. This is the beginning of the end. Perry has an almost comedy tumble in this excellently lit cave set. I've just actually watched The Descent, which this is how up to date I am. Recording this at the end of 2022, and it's a great shot. See from above, lots of smoke, brilliantly lit, very well done. And the cave set, I thought it was shot on location, to be honest, until I then read up afterwards. Because what you do when you watch film, isn't it? You then hit the internet to find out all the facts. He should have won an Oscar for those cave sets, and a great small-scale English sort of horror movie, British horror movie, although with an eclectic cast. Excellent. Love these characters. I love a mercenary in Doctor Who. It always made me feel a bit grown up as a kid, and all this stuff about picking chuckhaws, which Terence Dicks gives some background to in the book, saying it was some. He explains what they are, but Robert Holmes doesn't see the need to. It's basically, I've never been confined. It's like breaking stones. It's like being in a chain gang, picking chuckhaws, which suggests that these guys are crims, that they want to avoid the law. This is beautiful. This is handheld camera work here. And he's trusting not to see the full face of the actors. I think we have a hand on a shoulder, do we? Yeah, beautiful. This is unlike anything you've seen in Doctor Who from a director in a very, very long time. Peter Grimwade, I think, is very good at picture composition and pacing and editing and all of this sort of thing. But this feels like something out of nowhere. I was 10 when this was on, and I couldn't necessarily quite put my finger on what it was, but it did feel that this was something a bit more Sunday afternoon action movie, not just because of when I was watching it. And the pace and the cut, surrender, boom, cut, music. Roger Lim is on absolute fire. It's the minimalist nature of the music. I think it's a shame the military are kind. I think it's. I can see what they're thinking. With the military costumes, is that they're quite practical and they're sort of overalls, but they do look like they should be working on a building site or an oil rig, which are both practical places, but they don't give you quite the military feel that I would necessarily be after. And the actors are doing it nicely. Look at that beautiful light coming from the monitor. It's those little bits of attention to detail. And I love the fact that Chelak in any story would normally be the sort of either the heroic type or the stubborn base commander that eventually comes round. But as we discover, everyone's a bit morally compromised in this. Although Martin Cochrane is brilliantly elected to play him as the sort of typical military type, and I love the way that Robert Glenister sort of leers in the background. And it was fun seeing Robert Glenister in this as a kid because we knew him as the other guy from the Peter Davison sitcom Sink or Swim. So that felt like an appropriate piece of casting for Davison's last story. That felt like that was being done to acknowledge the fact that that's what he'd been doing when he started as Doctor Who, or it felt like it at the time. I don't know exact dates. This is great. We haven't seen Morgus yet. Yes, I remember watching there, and I love that looking at the camera, and the little bit of eye wobble. I love a little bit of eye wobble. This camera is handheld again, which just gives it a slightly sort of juddery feel. I love the augmentation of the guns with those little gas canisters on, or whatever they were. I remember when I got this a bit later and going, well, you know, why? Okay, why is and in the meantime, I'd seen polls that had voted Caves, you know, top, and I remember thinking, oh, really? A modern story is top? Is that better than things like Evil of the Daleks and classics like all of the Pertwee era and the Gothic, blah blah blah, and it was immediately apparent when I came to revisit it, you know, when I was getting videos some years later, that oh yes, the reason. And Graham Harper, I think, was winning polls as best director. And you go, oh yeah, no, I can see why this is the story that has the reputation. And I like to think of myself as somebody that champions the underdog, and there's something quite cool about going, yeah, you know, that thing that everybody likes, I don't like it. I mean, I think, yeah, there's also something very tiresome about that, and actually more people seem to want to be that sort of person now, that actually I think it's I feel slightly I feel slightly as though that's not very, very cool anymore and is a bit irritating. But also, one should never judge people's tastes and say, oh, you only like that or dislike that because of this. I'd just be genuine. Well, I genuinely like this. I love this the relationship here between the Doctor and Perry, where they've got this sort of dark humour. In fact, these two, the dynamic. Oh, I love this. If we could talk about this misunderstanding in a civilized manner, I like that. And doesn't he say, and if we prove to be hostile, then fair enough. And I like the way that this escalates. And he talks about urticaria. It's just those little bits of wording as well that you know, give a clue to the Doctor being knowledgeable, but they also sound good. Robert Holmes is very good at choosing words that are suggestive through their sound, not just because of what they say and their meaning. You know, they're good on the ear as well as on the brain receptors, if you like. Is it accidental? And now John Normington's such an interesting actor because it's a great piece of casting, because you know, he usually sort of played sort of fussy, funny little men, you know, and so to cast him as this horrible fascist, and I mean, it's is it a coincidence that he's got the slightly sort of domed forehead and slightly staccato delivery nasal thing of Norman Tebbit going on? For viewers abroad, Norman Tebbit is a very right wing, and I don't mean in the sort of, you know, fiscally right wing Queen and Country kind of way. He's right. He's quite he's pretty unpleasant individual. I feel Norman Tebbit is. Yeah. Anyway, let's not get into. But he was depicted by Spitting Image rather brilliantly in a sort of leather jacket with a yes, leader, which tells you what you need to know. And I remember this being quite revolutionary. This, you know, the 360 hologram, which is a beautiful touch from Graham Harper. He is really pulling out all the stops to make this visually interesting. The lighting is excellent as well, and then you've got this brilliant bits here where you have Christopher Gable as Sharaz Jek, who you don't really see in this episode, but you see little snatches of. You see his sort of slightly over hairy hands. They've got, you know, I think they've done something there as well, which is really interesting. That you know, again, it's the sort of attention to detail. And I believe that talking to the camera was actually a miscommunication from director to actor that they decided to stick with, and I really like it. I don't mind being slightly less than naturalistic if it gives a story its own unique feel or dynamic or edge, and I think that this does. I think the colours are all beautiful as well. The way that they've got the window and the colour seeping in from behind. It's really sort of beautifully composed. Everything. You know, it's not just his feel for action, Harper. It's his compositions. It's his colour schemes. And this is great. You know, this is you know, it's using a very, very small space and you know, filling it, you know, and a single camera there really at the top. Yeah, so there's just 2 cameras on this. Yeah, it's and you know the you know, you feel like the action is being perpetrated by people who've done, you know, people for whom this is what they do. This isn't just a load of actors doing this. And I think the casting, I remember thinking that Maurice Reeves was the real deal. And I was convinced at the time that well, I'll talk about Krelper later. Again, that shot of Chelak in profile with the other 2 in the background, absolutely fantastic. And this is very much, you know, what Caves is all about. Chelak has essentially acknowledged that the Doctor's been set up, and it's like, yeah, but tough. I love Robert Glenister's android acting. We don't know he's an android yet, but he's slightly dispassionate. But he's also slightly askew, which I rather like, and I love that thing about you know, death under the red cloth, and this is brilliant. That way that the camera moves, sort of follows them, but slightly jerkily, and the music dum, 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 as they're being sort of shoved out and prepared for execution. And then you cut to this scene in the lift, which is just done by lighting, and these brilliant 2 profiles of these 2 characters essentially lying to each other, but knowing that they're lying and acknowledging their lie. It's glorious. Glorious. And here we're having the setup of, we're having all the exposition about what Spectrox is and what it does, which again I think is sort of all rather artfully deployed. This is great. And again, this is just, you know, 1 camera on a small part of the set, but it's the way that the camera jerks up like that, and what they're doing there is obviously they're getting rid of their arms because they're having to beat a hasty retreat. That leads to what the sort of schism between them and Jack later on, where he says, you know, we had to dump the stuff, which is the sort of thing that happens, that doesn't often happen in dramas, but that happens in this one, because it's got a view to a wider picture. And I mean, the way that all of the information is being thrown in is very, 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 very good, and it's very, very grim, and yet it doesn't lose its sense of humour. And I think Nicola Bryant is great in this, the sort of gentle way that she's trying to come to terms with the fact that she doesn't feel very well, and that they're about to be killed. I think there are different ways to play this, and I think she plays it, you know, really intelligently and very real and not histrionically, and I think it really, really works. Love this dynamic between this pair, and I think she's terrific. She's terrific in this, and Davison is excellent. He's such a good actor. You know, he's it's just a great story, this, isn't it? Sorry, I'm going to be very boring. I'm going to try to be more interesting than just saying that's good, isn't it, and that's good. But also, you know, I don't want to be but I don't, yeah, but let's look at the bits I don't like. That's great. Again, it's just the little bits of, it's like a graveyard. Just, again, that's drama, and then it fades, like the look on the Doctor's face, and then the fade to an excessively hairy hand. I think they must have added hair to Christopher Gable's hand just to make it more interesting, alien, whatever. And you know that, and of course is a slight contrast to his very sleek, you know, leather-clad figure, and that's, you know, this costume is superb, and this. I remember when I hadn't remembered this from the first time I watched it, but then when I got it on video, and you're like, this is what people talk about when they talk about Graham Harper, and it's just a montage, but this is not a usual thing for 1980s or any sort of classic series Doctor Who, really, and it's atmospheric, and it's, you know, it's helped by the sparse music. There are, you know, this is Roger Lim, who did Arc of Infinity, you know, which is you know, where the music bounces off all 4 corners of the universe and into your ears, you know, whereas this is it's, you know, it's minimal, it's atmospheric, and you're getting Jack, you know, whispering just the odd thing here, just dropping you in these little bits of information and atmosphere, and it's you could find out what it is. It's nothing is wasted here. Nothing is, this first episode has been sort of non-stop without being breakneck, because it's had thoughtful moments and it's had quiet moments, and that I love that, because you go, oh, is that something happened there? It's not enough to, well, it is enough to make you sort of go, so they have escaped the cliffhanger that's to come, but it's sort of half there. It's like a shadow in your mind where you go, so then when next week it's confirmed, or in the next week you go, no, because I sort of knew that, but I still think it doesn't undermine the cliffhanger. It does two things at once. It's clever. David Neal is excellent casting, because he does have the air. He does come across as somebody that is older than he looks. I find that difficult to explain, but this idea that he's been taking Spectrox, so he's 25 years older than 35 years older than he actually looks. I think they've thought about that with the casting, and he's bottom of the credits, I think, David Neal, and it's a really good performance, and he was the lead in a thing called Noah's Castle, which was an ITV drama with Seth from the Horns of Nimon and General Hermack from the Space Pirates and David Neal, and it's basically about economic collapse and stockpiling, and I think David Neal tries to. I think there's a suggestion that he would sell his daughter to General Hermack, his underage daughter. So it's not what you'd expect of an ITV drama, stockpiling and paedophilia for due to economic woes, and this is great. I love the dynamic between these two. They're. He is the president, and it's all going on there in Morgus's eyes. Normington's so good; he's such a good piece of casting, and this is such a fantastic sequence. Again, I think slightly undermined by the fact that they're in building site gear, because it's because they've got the sword, haven't they, and they've got the military music. Now, of course, these are androids now. This is how this is explained, but we don't. We're not 100% convinced, and clearly Jack's been up to something, because otherwise, why is he laughing? But at the moment, he's a mysterious presence. Look at that, absolutely fantastic mask design there, and I love this whole exchange about the red cloth is for soldiers. A filthy little swine like that shot in the back. It's believable world building colouring, and it's so economical, and it says something about those two characters. It's very plausible, even though it's not something that we have or do, but it's enough rooted in our worlds of ceremony and militarism and all of that sort of thing, and how we deal with death and all of those sorts of things, and formalize it and ceremonialize it. It's clever writing. It's a cut above. And I remember this from being a kid. This was, it's just how boring is a doctor facing a firing squad cliffhanger, or kill them now cliffhanger, except it's machine guns and they fire and they're all shot in profile and it looks like the bullets are coming out, and it's a fantastic cliffhanger made up of pretty staple ingredients of Doctor Who, and I love it. I think everything about that episode, apart from the shambling bat cloak beast, is and the fact that opening scene between the Doctor and Perry doesn't quite make sense because some of it's been robbed of context. What an excellent episode. What an excellent episode. what am I gonna choose as my thing for my favourite thing? Well, let's have a think. I mean, the obvious headline for me with that episode, the whole story is Graham Harper. I mean, Graham Harper. I mean, he's matched very well to the material. You know, if you are doing a Doctor Who story, which is, you know, Robert Holmes at his dark sort of macho, you know, with Douglas Camfield being dead and not and you know, not anywhere near Doctor Who, because actually he died in 1984, wasn't he? So he wasn't dead when this was being made, or around this time. Anyway, doesn't matter. Douglas Camfield, you would have had Douglas Camfield. I mean, John Nathan Turner wouldn't have done anyway. But you know, with Douglas Camfield not directing it, you'd want somebody, you know, cut from a similar cloth. And Graham Harper, you know, learnt a lot of his trade under Douglas Camfield and sympathetic to the way that he did things, and stylistically, you know, there are similarities. So, you know, this is a fairly Douglas Camfield-y script with sort of mercenary type figures and, you know, a bit of violence and, you know, well-drawn hard men kind of characters that require good, if not but not too flowery actors. And Harper immediately comes in and makes a statement, and that includes, you know, the use of machine guns, the use of handheld cameras, the use of much sparser mood music rather than, you know, an overabundance of clattery radiophonics. The color composition, the softness of the color palette in places. The filming and design in the caves and the mist, so much going on. I think going into this, I was going to choose the fact that it's machine guns, because I love that cliffhanger. So I was going to choose the cliffhanger, and then I was going, well, what does this cliffhanger speak of? It speaks of that choice to use machine guns instead of lasers or single shot guns. But it's the fact that they're machine guns. It makes it feel more visceral. You can feel the sort of hot bullets, you know, flying out. The hot bullet casings flying out. You can there's a visceral directness to to being torn apart by a volley of machine gun fire than there is to, you know, a zap from a laser, which seems slightly more sort of clinical, less visceral, and we're slightly removed from that. So I think it makes it immediately more, you know, immediate and contemporary and threatening. You can feel it. So close you can feel their firepower. But watching that, there are just so many things. Like when, you know, they're bundled out of Chelak's office and the camera follows them and that music pipes in. The montage sequence with Sherry, there's so much of it that screams Graham Harper is doing so much more than a lot of people are doing at this time. So much attention to detail, so much energy, pace, keeping it going. There's not a static moment, even in scenes where a lot of people are talking, because of the way he's framed it, because of the way that he's made the actors be a little bit more direct, or a little bit more terse, or a little bit more sort of biting or edgy. There's a real sort of undercurrent of viciousness. You know, it's an uncompromising world, and everyone's a bit, you know, everyone's scrape their knees and bang their elbows, or, you know, has a cough. You know, it's just real, and but it's a harsh reality that, you know, never loses sight of the fact that it's Doctor Who, because it has a sense of humour and because it's exciting, because it's a bit scary. But so I think I have to, and I don't know if Erica's playing it like this, because Erica was one of the first people I asked to do it, so hadn't heard anybody else do this. So I think she may have just gone for certain scenes, or Peter Davison, the way Peter Davison did this and the way Peter Davison did that. But watching that, I cannot, in all conscience, do anything but go, Graham Harper announces himself so profoundly, with such an impact, as this director is so suited to this material and is elevating everything, or responding to what's already good and doing it justice and serving it well. It's got to be Graham Harper. It has to be Graham Harper. What is Erica's thing for episode 1?
Episode 1. What my favourite thing from this story is the cliffhanger at the end. Obviously at the end, because I really believed, when I was a child, I really believed that the doctor had been shot. So much that I wouldn't go into school the next day. I kicked, screamed. I would not go into school because I thought the doctor was dead. So now, looking back as an adult on that, it just brings back those memories of the fear and belief that I thought the doctor had been shot, and it just goes to show how scary and how well done how good it was done.
So the thing I was going to choose, the thing I went into it thinking I was going to choose. That's interesting, isn't it? That both she and I, that had been our thing from when we were kids. I remember that cliffhanger. I remember the angle I was watching it from, the chair I was sitting on, the room that I was in. It wasn't a room in our house. It was a room at the local vicar's house. And I remember exactly where I was. And I didn't have to wait. As I say, we watched the whole thing in one go. But I still remember thinking that was an absolutely shocking, memorable and brilliant cliffhanger. And it's because of it's because of the way it's shot, because of the fact that it's machine guns, because it's built up through that ceremonial thing and the beat of the music. Oh! And it's just a doctor versus a firing squad. It's just to kill them now. There have been infinite numbers of those. I remember thinking at the time, this is a traditional kind of cliffhanger, but it's a cliffhanger, Jim, but not as we know it. And so I went into this episode knowing I was going to choose that. But it was just Harper touch after Harper touch after Harper touch. And now I sort of go, yes, I wish I had chosen the cliffhanger, and why didn't I stick with my guns? But I had to be honest to my reaction to what I saw then. And there was just too many bits that owe their greatness to Graham Harper. And because this is his first episode of Doctor Who, I think he has to get that nod. He is head and shoulders above almost everything that surrounds him in a 5-year radius, really. But I acknowledge Erica's choice of being that cliffhanger, which sort of owes everything to Harper. It really does. On paper, I don't think it would have been. On paper, it's nothing like. It's in execution, it's much more than a sum of its parts. So, thanks to Erica for that. I'm one behind, but I can still claw my way back. But I can't beat the episode ending that has just been celebrated in this podcast. So I'm simply going to say, kill this episode, kill it now. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Happy Times and Places. The time is the Caves of Androzani, and the place is episode 2, sort of. Erica Lear, who is quite a character, and somebody who I got to know many years ago. She'd asked me to do an interview for a fanzine or something, but she runs a group in Liverpool and has put on conventions and is a good laugh and a sort of nicely uncynical presence in the world of Doctor Who, and it's always nice to have a chat to her. And I'm unsurprised she has chosen the Caves of Androzani. A story that shouldn't be too difficult for me to eulogise, because it's not one that I've ever felt the need to, go against the grain and go. I'm not saying that if you don't like Caves of Androzani, you're doing it to go against the grain. You might just not like it, but there are stories that are very popular that I've occasionally sort of felt quite cool. As cool as a Doctor Who fan could feel, for going, oh, everybody likes that. I don't like it. They're wrong. They should like something more esoteric, like the ones what I like. But Caves, I've always been a bit of a traditionalist with. I liked it when I first watched it, and then when I came to revisit it, when I got it a few years later, it was definitely, it stood the test of time, and you could see why it was a cut above much of what surrounded it, which was, much of that down to Graham Harper, who was my choice of thing for episode 1. So let's see how we do with episode 2. Erica and I are on a mission to celebrate all the good things about the Caves of Androzani. Alexa, volume 3. And I'm going to press play in 3, 2, 1. So yes, I mean, I remember, as I say, liking this when I was a kid, but I then remember seeing at a convention I picked up some copies of DWB, Doctor Who Bulletin, which was a controversial sort of, it was slightly a cut above a fanzine. It was very well professionally produced, but it did have a slightly grumpy attitude towards John Nathan Turner, to say the least. But it also had a, top 10, top 50 rankings, the all-time classics and the all-time clangers ratings. And suddenly I realised the joy in being able to sort of choose and disagree with what people liked and what people didn't. It's interesting going back and looking at some of those, what were seen as bad stories. I remember The Massacre being quite high in, all-time clanger Hartnells. And you think that's just largely because people don't really know anything about it at that time, because there wasn't anything like the what was available, what is available now. But I was quite surprised to see, Caves of Androzani, top all-time Davison and all-time classics of all time. So I hadn't realised I was in the presence of greatness when I watched it, but that's because I'm not sure that you ever do. But then when I look back on it, seeing that, you go, yeah, I can see why. That's very well done. I mean, I remember, I'm sure, the vicar saying, well, no, that it would have made holes in the sheets, and you go, well, yeah, it would have done if it wasn't a program that kids watch. Although, I would never mention the word children when talking about Doctor Who. It was my great desire that nobody thought of Doctor Who as a children's program, even though I, as a child, was watching it and was bewitched by it when I was a child. But no, I wanted it to be seen as a grown-up program. But of course, its strength really is that it's suitable for children, but it does things occasionally that make kids think that what they're watching is quite strong stuff. And it's only when you watch it with a vicar who goes, well, there should be bullet holes, that you go, oh yeah, maybe this isn't in the same league as the actual adult shows, but it's still not really for children, even though I am a child, but I'll ignore that. This is all lovely. I like the I feel this is a kind of dig at Norman Tebbit or conservative politics of the time, this idea that you make people unemployed and then you punish them for that unemployment, or you make them work to get their benefits, which is not the same as working for a wage. Or it could just be to show what a horrible world the world of politics is in Androzani. This is so beautifully shot, and I love Peter Davison's kind of hard stare that he gives her. For somebody who gets the inaccurate descriptors of the wet vet, or that he's slightly sort of bland, I think completely doesn't notice Peter Davison's brilliant. acting and performance. And I love the attitude that he has. I remember watching this. Some dear friends of mine at university, they were so kind. They bought me a Cyberman. It was on Doctor Who's birthday. They bought me a Sevens Cyberman and let me put on a sort of show for them. We watched loads of Doctor Who together. And I think now, well, what good friends they were for really indulging me. And it was at their house. But I got really annoyed because we watched I remember this episode. I remember they talk now about a deep penetration mission, and it's Ensign Cass. And I always thought, oh, Cass, because that's the name of a character in the Robots of Death. But this is brilliant because, again, it's showing what an uncompromising world this this is, and that Chelak, usually the sort of person who would be the goody, really, is uncompromising, and he's watching his own back, and he'll send a guy on essentially a suicide mission, an extra we don't even know, but that almost gives it a bit of poetry as well, to save his skin, and it's got Sanity in there giving him the good advice. But I remember my friend Greg, who's a smart guy, just pissing himself because it's a deep penetration mission, and then missed all of the rest of this because I was having to sort of back that off. And it's well, you choose to take that as a double entendre if you want to. I don't think that was the writer's intention, because we're in caves and blah, blah, and why would you do that to then make audience members who are easily distracted miss some really good stuff that you've slaved over a typewriter to conjure, because there's a double entendre. I remember being annoyed with my friends who were doing a lovely thing. They were hosting a Doctor Who night for me. Brilliant. This is so well shot. Davison, so good. The hand on the shoulder, the rattling music, all that stuff missed because of deep penetration mission. And they did it again here, which I love this scene. It's got a beautiful symmetry to it. It's fantastically filmed. It's a thing about sort of status, and again, it's showing what a cruel world, and however nobody really likes each other. You can tell why Eric Say would like this script. Everyone hates each other. But it's painting a cruel world that the Doctor has kind of stumbled into, the most sort of innocent and youthful and of doctors, and here again they have there's a line, isn't there, where he says, you guys have got two choices, or you two guys have got a choice. You guys have got one option. You stick with me, or you can stay here. And again, my friend go, well, that's two options. And you go, oh, really? Watch the scene, enjoy that. By the way, is the father. That's Les Conrad, the father of the Conrad twins, who are in the Twin Dilemma in the next story. But again, they were giggling about that. You can quibble with the character's phraseology. Sometimes people don't phrase themselves elegantly. You could also argue it is really only one option, because staying here is an option, or the one option is the choice between the two. It doesn't matter. But again, the fact that caused sort of smart-arsery from students, friends of mine, at the expense of this, which is brilliantly filmed, brilliantly acted, brilliantly scored, everything about it. Just made me think, do I watch telly differently from how other people watch it? There was also an argument that, he's not really making him chew the thing, but again, you'd kind of argue that that's the point. And again, enjoy it for what it is, go for it for what it is, or maybe sort of think about that afterwards and then realise, oh no, he wasn't really going to make him chew it. Yeah, so I'm not a fan of Gogglebox. He says as he talks through an entire television program, but I do find I do get quite cross when people sort of chip in during a program to say something that is inaccurate or disproved later, or just not helpful. But I'm aware that that's perhaps very much me. I hope there's some sympathy in my audience here. Davison is so good here. He is so good. This is a really nice side of his Doctor. He gets a bit tetchy and Frontios as well, but he's really rising to the drama of this. You can tell that. You can't tell because he's a seamless, flawless actor. I'm not going to say you can tell that he's enjoying this script. No, he's just matching it. He's just treating it with the respect it deserves, and because he's so good. And look at the way that Harper shoots all of this stuff, the dynamic that he's got between these three, and I like Holmes' slightly old-fashioned phraseology as well. You have the mouth of a prattling jackanapes, and I love the insolent smile that Davison gives and then walks off without saying anything. And of course, Christopher Gable is so elegant and so controlled, but you can tell that, underneath that, because he was a dancer, wasn't he? So he moved so beautifully, and you have that brilliant costume that he's got that's so tight-fitting, that sleek physique of his. But underneath, he's broken. And inside there's a like the mud bubbling under the surface of Androzani underneath his his elegance is the bubbling fury of a vengeful psychopath. It's all so good, and the gloom, the lighting, the fact that all the sets and everything, which are quite simple, and there's sort of control panels stuck against sort of rock formations or whatever, are shot in a way that you don't really make them out, which means that's very helpful to the limited resources of the production. Oh, it's just so good. And that mask, look at that mask. And of course, the story goes that Christopher Gable was seen for the part of Salatine, which is a good role. Goes to a very good actor, but was really interested in playing Jack. And I think they'd looked at people like David Bowie, hadn't they, for Jack? But Gable had kind of lobbied to be given a bit of Jack, and it's one of the great Doctor Who performances. I think he's one of the great Doctor Who villains. And it just goes, and I always like a story where an actor goes in for a smaller part and gets given a bigger one, because it's what old actors dream of, especially actors that are usually seen for smaller parts. We all see things through a filter of our own inadequacies, don't we? Maybe we don't. Maybe I do, and I'm trying to universalize myself, like the narcissist that we all are, that I am. I want the head of that perfidious, treacherous degenerate brought me here. It's wonderful. He's so good at this slightly melodramatic dialogue, and yet when it's done well, and when it's pitched properly within a production, it actually just elevates it slightly. I don't think you particularly want your Doctor Who to be sort of Ken Loachian monosyllables. You want a bit of extravagance to the phraseology and to the characterization, but not in a way that is parodic or unbelievable. It's a bit, it's like Shakespeare. Shakespeare is all a bit overblown, but it tells you, but it raises, it raises the stakes in everything that it does, in its forms of expression, in its dialogue, in the preoccupations of its characters, in the psychology that it portrays. But it's all big. It's all bigger than we would do sitting in a living room. But to get to a sort of dramatic and exciting, but a truth. Or it's a silly program about a man who travels through time and space in a police box. But that's great. I love the sort of semi-comic stuff between Morgus, who's such a scum. He's such a horrible man, and that brilliant the fades we've had between Jack and Morgus, and the profile of then Morgus going around in his chair having said, just make it half a minute, which is a lovely piece of black comedy. And Barbara Kinghorn is very good as Timmin, kind of, they're both acknowledging that what they're doing is, being a bit grim, but without, of course, acknowledging it at all. It's very clever. And I love this scene. Again, it's bleak, isn't it? Does this taste as good as it looks? No, worse. You're not going to be our friend. Normally in a Doctor Who thing, you get thrown together with a prisoner and you become mates and plot the escape. No, he's going. They're going, why are you so cold? Well, because he'll kill me now because he's got you. Everything is just that little bit darker. Now, I think perhaps where Eric Saywood went wrong was that he thought that this was the default and this is how you should do Doctor Who. And you can see season 22 trying to ape a lot of this. And it has to be done in good hands. And Robert Holmes and Graham Harper are probably the best hands for wielding pen and camera, respectively. And this is so grim and cruel. The fact that he issues the news that they're dying through laughter. It's grim and it's horrible and great dialogue. TDP. what's that, thermal death point, but it's Spectrox toxemia. Toxemia is a good word as well, and it's of course reminiscent of the dystronic toxemia in Genesis of the Daleks. But it all makes it just seem a little bit real, and that makes it somehow seem more threatening because they have abbreviations, and they have proper medical terms and all of that. And I love the way that when he turns him round, he suddenly the smile goes and the laughter goes, and it's severe and it's real and it's desperate, it's dangerous. It's really good. It's really good, and it's really well observed. But yes, I think you can. I think the reason this works so well, I mean, one, it's quite often Doctor Who. Well, I was going to say quite often Doctor Who doesn't have a sense of occasion, and that and that opening and closing stories aren't always a big deal. But actually, Planet of the Spiders is an obvious big climax. The War Games is an obvious big climax epic that reveals something about the show's history. So maybe I'm wrong there. Colin Baker couldn't help his climax, his exit, nor could McCoy. But this has This has a real sense of that. They saved the best till last. This is taken seriously. The fact that it's a finale. I even like the way he eats his green porridge. The way he sort of, and all they ever find are its table leavings in it, and the way that he licks the spoon in that sort of grim that it's I don't know. There's something about the ritual that he does. That is, he's thought about just doing the spoon in a slightly different way that's not unbelievable, but that's slightly unusual, that's a bit watchable. Like it. But yes, there is an argument that they did this well, and so they went, now let's do this all the time, and they did it less well than this. And the incessant violence, the sometimes contextless violence. I mean, I actually quite like season 22, but I know a lot of people who don't. And I'm sympathetic to the idea that some of the violence in season 22 was unnecessary, and it obviously didn't do the show any favors in the eyes of those pulling the strings. But I mean, it's because any Doctor Who story, of course, works because it's part of a great big mosaic. And the beauty that we have with Doctor Who is that, unlike I think almost any other show, is that it remains itself, but Carnival of Monsters in Doctor Who is the same way that this is Doctor Who, is the same way that Spearhead from Space is Doctor Who, and they are all totally different, and yet they're all Doctor Who. And I deliberately chose ones written by the same guy as well. And this is very nice, artfully done as well. Salatine is perfect. Oh no, he's not. He's actually a bit weird. But I hadn't noticed Glenister acting like that when I was a kid, so it was quite a pleasant surprise to see him doing it as a grown-up and going, okay, it's being given a signal, but it's not Archer, it's not Hammy, and you can see why. Chelak, who's his own kind of oaf anyway, doesn't see, but the actor is giving the signal of his slightly inhuman, which is helped within the writing as well, of course, that he's one step ahead. And this is great. This is so well done here. I mean, it is a trope, and there are discussions to be had about Doctor Who's use of disability as a shorthand for mental instability or badness. But I think this is a perfectly, it gives a lot of motivation to Jack, and again the casting of somebody with such elegant body language. And the fact that he's I love that, doesn't he have the line about I who was once comely? I think that, again, that's a word like jackanapes that has a slightly old fashioned Fessanine back of slime. I love all of that use of language. Comely is particularly kind of wholesome and sort of slightly melancholic, and the way that he's standing up, dead straight to try and maintain his dignity while he's being sort of gnarled up inside. But yes, I mean, I would be interested in watching this with my other half, who might have something to say about, well, you know, especially if she knew that there was also a Talons of Weng Chiang, where, you know, the mad bad guy has his mask ripped off and is all gnarled underneath. But, you know, it's science fiction and it's horror, and these are tropes that exist within the genre, and I think obviously one is more sensitive to them today. But I think I think you do get a pass when you're doing sort of melodramatic storytelling, especially when, you know, Jack is actually treated with a certain, you know, dignity. He's actually probably in the end one of the more sympathetic characters in this. And I think it's a reasonable character motivation to give somebody to say, well, you know, you caught me in a mud burst and physically damaged me, therefore I'm, you know, bent on revenge. And it then evokes the old Phantom of the Opera and all of the other stuff. So it helps with that in terms of we've got an anchor in storytelling that we're familiar with. This is brilliantly lit. You know, these cave sets are hard to do. I talked last episode about watching The Descent, for which I think the designer should have won an Oscar because I thought it was filmed on location. You know, these are sets, but I think they're a really good stab, and they're very, very well lit, and you know, they allow for good staging of these scenes. And this is, I mean, the lighting here is fantastic. Who is doing the lighting? Is it Babbage? I'm going to keep an eye out for who's doing the lighting. It's excellently lit, this whole story. And Graham Harper's, you know, got everybody to up their game. And those shadows really help. But I love all of these characters too. You know, I believe that these guys have slightly sort of edgy relationships, you know, that are down to money and convenience. And I remember thinking this was so clever at the time, because I loved the Doctor having two hearts. That was a thing you knew if you were a fan. And you go, I mean, it's obviously now, it's just a thing hanging outside his thing. But it seemed so brilliant to be able to see what the android was seeing and the Doctor's two hearts underneath. And of course, it seemed like a really clever thing. Again, it's the sort of thing as a kid watching, you feel smart to be involved in, because you go, oh yeah, because it would read a human as having one heart, but because he's got two hearts, it won't react, it won't know how to react, so it gives him a chance to do what he does. I mean, you'd think actually it would just be programmed to just, you know, if it reads something that it doesn't quite read properly, it would shoot. But I think because it's a, and I like the way he picks up the gun. Oh, and then they cock their guns. So it's you know, he's thinking, because this wasn't shot in order. You know, he's thinking about how one scene links to the other. It's all wonderful. But yeah, I think that's one of those things when you're watching when as a kid you feel smart. And that's always nice to bring you in when you don't understand. I didn't understand all the politics of this. I didn't pick up on some of the subtleties of characterization. I picked on a lot of the unsubtleties of characterization, which again goes back to the Phantom of the Opera and the revenge story and all of that. But I'm sure I didn't really quite understand how everybody fitted into each other. Now, Krelper here is Roy Holder. Both of these guys have gone now. Both had wonderful careers. And I was convinced that Krelper was George Sweeney, who was in Citizen Smith, who was an actor I really liked, and he was in other things. And he had a sort of name that fitted, George Sweeney. And he played sort of tough guy. He was a character called Speed in Citizen Smith, which was a comedy with Robert Lindsay and Stephen Greif, who's just no longer with us, and Cheryl Hall from Carnival of Monsters, and Peter Vaughan and Hilda Braid. Anyway, I liked George Sweeney. He was an actor that I liked, and he's not unlike, his physiognomy is not unlike that of Roy Holder. And I remember sort of looking at the credits and going, why is it not saying George Sweeney? And they went too quickly, and I was quite young, so I didn't quite read them, you know, as well as I would have. And it was only when I, you know, got to look at guys, I was like, no, it's not George Sweeney, it's somebody else. And then got to know Roy Holder's work and was like, oh no, he's pretty cool as well. But I do think it's sad that George Sweeney never ended up in Doctor Who. Although I also think it's sad that Michael Craze was going to play Krelper, and that was vetoed by John Nathan Turner. And actually having Michael Craze, not only because it would be nice to have Michael Craze in the story, but having Michael Craze in another last story of a Doctor, because he was there as Ben for William Hartnell's last story. So I thought that was a shame. And really odd of John Nathan Turner, who never passed up an opportunity to have a nod to the past of the show, suddenly decided not to. It seems to me like a sudden wielding of arbitrary power, which I never like it when people do. She has been taken from me. He's so good. And I love the bit where Salatine holds Perry in front of him. I mean, he's not doing it, he knows it won't shoot because she's got the belt. But again, it seems like a sort of savage and practical and uncompromising thing. It seems quite un-Doctor Who-y, which is what I like. And here, of course, this episode has been perfect. The characterization, the dialogue, the lighting, the filming, the scripting. And of course, the bit that anybody might catch by chance is this bit, which has got a crap. It's the cloak that really doesn't help, and it's wobbly fingers. Look, it's you can tell its fingers aren't sort of filled. So of course the bit that most people catch, or the bit that most people remember, and of course the bit that my student friends who are watching this with me, they weren't going to let You've Got One Option and Deep Penetration Mission go. They weren't going to let Wobbly-Fingered Cloak Dragon go, were they? So of course the derision and hilarity was ringing in my ears as this episode saw itself out, which is a shame because the last cliffhanger had been so good. And I mean, I would say it's probably one of about 20 seconds in the whole hour and a half that's a bit pony. And it's the end of episode 2, which is a real shame. But yeah, it is Don Babbage doing the lighting. Take the week off, Toby. So there we go. That was episode. I think that's a great episode. That's an episode of, if only for the last couple of seconds. That's an episode of Doctor Who I would happily show anybody. I think it's magnificent, very, very strong. What am I going to choose? That's really hard because, I mean, I was thinking Shara's Jack because it's a beautiful costume. It goes without saying it's a wonderful performance, and I love that dialogue that he has and those moments that he has with Perry and the way that the Doctor sort of interacts with him. And for Jack, he's captured Perry, and there's this other bloke, and the Doctor sort of faces him down and kind of goes, "This is my show, pal." And it's so nice seeing Davison do that. It's another side to Davison's repertoire that I think again is often underestimated. He's a much stronger actor than I think he's well, no, I think everyone knows he's a good actor. He's never out of work, but I think he's a much more interesting actor. He's much more of a character actor than he's given credit for. I think he's a brilliant Doctor. And I love the way that, he infuses all of those scenes with Jack with a kind of, steely-eyed insolence. But Jake's dialogue is great, and that backstory and all of the stuff that sort of how he frames him, and I love that mask and that sleek fitting costume and his gait, his body language, and I think watching it this time, albeit I'm aware I'm talking all the way through it, which I got annoyed with my mates for doing, but what struck me, I think most in this watch today is Jack. But it's difficult because I feel I can't just choose one character, because I remember as a kid my favourite character was Stotts, because he was like he felt like he was from a grown-up show, and he was played by a sort of genuinely, earthy, tough guy, working class, regionally accented, although not particularly strongly, but he wasn't, he wasn't, his diction wasn't as RSC as a lot of Doctor Who bad guys' diction often is. So it felt like he'd come in from a grown-up show. Maybe that's why I thought George Sweeney was in it, because it felt like they were from the Sweeney, with his machine gun that I loved with the gas things on it. So I loved those characters because they made me feel that my show was grown up. It was only later that Morgus made a big impact on me because I think he's more of a character for the grown-ups in the room. The cynical, wily, politician, businessman type who will, sacrifice anything for his ends, but will always portray the, has a veneer of respectability, whereas actually he's as conniving or more conniving and cold-hearted than anybody else, but he was a respectable man. And again, Salatine, I remember quite liking Salatine as a character, but it's only again later that I realised what a good job and what an interesting job Robert Glenister was doing. He seemed quite a bit like a kind of heroic character when I was younger. I only picked up on the edges, when I watched it again, a few years down the line. So all the characters, Chellak's a great character, Krelper's a great character, even the President, and David Neal is excellent as the President. They're all great characters. So am I doing them a disservice if I choose Jack? And my other possibility is the scene between Krelper and Stotch, where one stands up, standing astride the other. They have a difference of opinion, and the scene ends with the other one astride the other, having re-established who's boss. But after a brilliantly filmed, giddying scene of Krelper being dangled over the edge of the cliff and had a poison capsule put in his gob and threatened at knife point. I mean, this is the sort of thing that as a kid I'm going, whoa! And then, of course, watching it with my sort of 18, 20-year-old university mates, it was soft stuff to them, and that didn't seem to hit them at all, because, of course, we were used to watching films that had far worse. But in the context of it being in Doctor Who, it's incredible. And now, looking at it now, you go, there aren't many scenes like that with Doctor Who. And there's similar stuff. I mean, the bit in Revelation of the Daleks where Lilt goes, I must mark her. But that seems like that's Eric Saywood going, you can do things like that. But that seems to me slightly gratuitous, because it doesn't come from anywhere and it doesn't go anywhere. It's just like, it's knives, it's violence, it's visceral. Whereas this comes from character dynamic. This is that whole scene is about character dynamic. It's about the fractious relationship between Stotts and Krelper, and what he has to do to maintain his command over what is obviously a bunch of bloodthirsty rogues. I think it's also very clever how you have that whole bunch of them, but the only two that talk to each other are Stotts and Krelper, and that's a necessity of the way that television can only afford a certain amount of speaking actors and characters and stuff. But I actually think that works pretty well, because all those other ones get kind of involved in that scene, don't they? Because while Stotts is wrestling Krelper, Jerry O'Brien, who's the bearded one, he kind of points his gun at the other two as if to say, you're not getting involved here. So you've got a little dynamic going between those, Jerry O'Brien and the Les Conrad one and the other one. And Jerry O'Brien and Roy Holder both died last year. Well, I'm actually recording this on the first day of 2023, but let's say last year. They both died in 2021. They were both on my in memoriam in 2021. What's your in memoriam, Toby? I do a Doctor Who in memoriam at the end of every year and put it on YouTube. So if you've never seen those, do have a search. It's where I just sort of do a list, a video list and clips and pictures of people from the world of Doctor Who who have left us. And Roy Holder and Jerry O'Brien were both on the same list in the same year. So look, those are the two that, but there's also the Cave set. The music's got to have a nod somewhere. Davison's the extra edge to Davison's performance. But even when I think of that, I think of Jack's leather-gloved hand going on the shoulder. I think I'm going to go with my instinct. I'm going to go for Sharry's Jack, not just the performance, which I think is brilliant. I think Christopher Gable is superb, and I'm really glad he successfully lobbied to get that part, having been seen for a different one. I can't imagine anybody else doing it as well. And temptation to go for a real star name as well. He was hugely respected. He was one of the most respected ballet dancers of his generation, and hugely. But didn't do an awful lot of television acting. He's a film actor in some of Ken Russell's things, isn't he? But anyway, I will go for Shara's Jack, because I love the tight leather costume. That mask is so beautiful, and what that dynamic that he has with Davison and with Nicola Bryant, that sort of threesome that they have there, of this very uneasy, where he's trying to be sort of civilized and nice to them, but Davison's sort of going, "I've got your number," and Paris trying to remain calm under what is a bit creepy, But you also are sympathetic with Jack because, he was once comely and now hides in a cave with androids, and and that suppressed rage that he has. Yes, please. I am going to go for Shara's Jack, but, not just performance, look, writing, performance, character, dialogue, the whole shebang. What's Erica chosen?
Episode 2. Well, okay. So I was 7 when I first watched the Caves of Androzani. So I think my favourite thing from this would have been the whole plot twist with Celatine. That you first are told that Celatine had a doppelganger or an android in the base, and I thought this was wonderful as a 7-year-old, and I'm just realising about plots and how things are done and how things are written. So this is a favourite bit of mine, the bit where you go, he's a spy.
That is a good bit, and actually I remember that being a bit that I remembered hitting very well when I was a kid. I'd forgotten that until Erica reminded me there. And I could have chosen that scene between the Doctor and Salatine where he laughs at their misfortune, and then that change of expression when the Doctor spins him around and goes, "Look what's going on," because I just love the way that is played. That's two good actors having a bit of rehearsal time to just work out a really interesting dynamic. I love that scene. But yes, I remember that plot twist being a thing that I could hang my understanding on as a kid, and go, "Oh yeah, because he's that, and he's and now that they've escaped, what's that going to mean for the one that's in the base?" And that was a good plot twist for me as a kid as well. And I've perhaps underestimated this time around because I take it so much for granted. But it is a great bit of plotting and storytelling, and it allows for much of the stuff that takes place from now, and some interesting dynamics in the next episode. So that's a good choice. And I'm might I have chosen that on another day? I don't know, but it's certainly one I can appreciate and agree with. So yeah, I don't think I'm going to win this, am I? But everybody loses in the Caves of Androzani, so it's kind of appropriate. Well, I thoroughly enjoyed that episode. I think it's one of the strongest episodes of Doctor Who, and I'm working on a podcast at the moment about not everything being perfect, and so it's ruefully that I look at it and go, yeah, I mean, it's everything about that episode is pretty much bang on, apart from the closing minute and a half, if that, and the cliffhanger and the dragon. So just goes to show that nothing can ever quite be perfect. So look, like this, like I've just got to a conclusion. I've just made my closing point, and now I'm sort of tailing off, trying to find something profound to say. But in a way, isn't that what it's all about? Is that nothing is ever perfect? But no, because I don't agree with that, because I don't like Doctor Who because of its imperfections. And I think people are patronising when they say that. Yeah, Doctor Who's good because it's a bit naff. No, the naff bits used to set my teeth on edge and used to make my guts clench in embarrassment. So no, that's patronising. Be off with you. I like Doctor Who because it's good. I get really annoyed those moments when it's not. But as a metaphor for life, the thing that the fact that the thing that I love most in the world has bits that, I think it shows that that seeking perfection is perhaps a folly, and that you can still, great enjoyment. I loved watching that, even with something with obvious faults. So that teaches us to live with our own obvious faults, because nothing is perfect. Although, of course, none of us can live with our obvious faults. Anyway, 9 out of 10. No, it is. It's a 10 out of 10 story. So it's the 10 out of 10 story, even though it's got bits that don't quite work. And that's okay, because you can, because nobody's perfect, but you can still be a 10 out of 10. I don't know how that works, but it's true. Anyway, have I wrung enough meaning out of a metaphor I tried to conjure? Well, if I didn't, it just proves that nobody's perfect, which I said about 10 minutes ago. Should have stopped then, so I'm going to stop now. It was going so well, and then it all went to shit at the end. Like the Caves of Androzani, episode 2. Well now, will Doctor Who get out of a cliffhanger involving being loomed over by the most disappointing aspect of an otherwise brilliant Doctor Who story? I had a running gag, actually, in my second Doctor Who show, My Stepson Stole My Sonic Screwdriver, that I cut quite close to the end of actually doing it. I had a running gag about, the one aspect of it. Every Doctor Who story had something that didn't work or made you cringe. And I called it the giant rat because, the giant rat was, the one thing that sullied an otherwise perfect Doctor Who story, The Talons of Weng-Chiang. Interestingly, of course, time, and now that we have conversations about, the appropriation of the appropriateness of makeup and Caucasian actors playing ethnic parts, that has cast a bigger shadow over The Talons of Weng-Chiang, which I note with interest rather than anything else. So the giant rat would actually be a bad example because of The Talons of Weng-Chiang is not now so straightforward in our eyes. So perhaps I would call it the becloaked bat monster. It doesn't trip off the tongue as well as the giant rat. But anyway, I'm mulling at the moment because I'm trying to write a podcast about things never quite being perfect. Is there a perfect Doctor Who story? Caves of Androzani is the one that's won many, many, many polls, but I don't think anyone would say that the bat monster is good, although a couple of people on my Patreon have pointed out, Harper shoots it as well as possible. He shoots it from underneath so that it looms over the Doctor in that cliffhanger. I still think, we get that full-length shot of it far away, and I still don't think... And yeah, there are attempts, especially this episode coming up, to kind of shoot it only in snatches, but with the best will in the world, it doesn't quite work. So is there such a thing as a perfect Doctor Who story? But is there such a thing as a perfect anything? So therefore, do you give anything 10 out of 10? I've started to, actually. For the wheezing, groaning sound, they've just announced that they're doing Horror of Fang Rock, and they encourage you to sort of put your thoughts on Twitter, because they release, as they record, which I don't do quite so much. There's less audience interaction from mine. I'm far too... I can only really rely on... Well, no, I can't even rely on myself, so I have to do this kind of in a bubble, and with, pre-recorded contributions from guests. But I decided in the end, I initially gave Horror of Fang Rock, I think, 98 out of 100, and I thought, no... Actually, because I think the bit at the end when the Doctor talks to the Root and is slightly drawn out, I don't think the cliffhanger to part 1 is great, the Airfix boat. But in the end, I just thought, yeah, but it's Doctor Who. There are episodes of Juliet Bravo where there's probably an unconvincing door, because it was made at that time. And I went, Doctor Who's my favourite thing ever. You can have things that are 100 out of 100, even if they've not got perfect things about them. Sometimes... It's like in a relationship, isn't it? Are you saying that the person you're with is perfect, or do you love them more than anything in the world, even though you're aware of their imperfections? And I think that might be a better way to be, although I've always been a glass half empty sort of person. I've always been no, I can never quite give it the full marks. But now that you're exposed to other people's opinions, where a lot of people... on Twitter, I've just been seeing somebody on Twitter completely missing the point of a film, for example. And going, God, you just spend all your time saying this is rubbish and that's rubbish. And is that a way to be? To just sort of pick holes in the endeavour of others, which seems to me actually a less valuable use of your time than what they're doing, which is making a flawed something. Do you know what I mean? It's yeah. But actually, there's something cathartic about going, well, I watched this thing that's not very important. It's just a disposable piece of entertainment, and I, got all my frustration out, or I enjoyed the process of in a safe environment, just being excoriating about something that doesn't really matter. So it's complicated, isn't it? And I talk too much about everything. So it's part 3 of the Caves of Androzani. My guest is Erica Lear, who, despite being barking, and I say that with great affection, also has a heart of gold, and is a good egg. And I'm glad she hasn't just gone Peter Davison for every episode, because I wouldn't have put it past her. But I've probably known Erica a very long time now. It's funny because you think you meet people through Doctor Who and you sort of go, oh yeah, I know them. And then you break it down and you go, oh my goodness, I've known them for blooming ages. Anyway, let's see what she chooses for part 3 in 3, 2, 1. So, yes, I watched this all those years ago as an omnibus, but I would watch the opening and closing titles, and let me not get started on my frustration with having to scrabble around to find the remote control in order that the closing titles don't disappear just before you've even had a second to register that they're happening. That is a sign of the oncoming collapse of civilization. Robert Holmes. I searched Robert Holmes recently to see if there was any reports in any papers, even trade papers. Well, no, I didn't get I don't get Ariel or the BBC's or any of those. But anywhere in the media of his death, considering he was, writing Doctor Who that was being made to go out, and actually, his last work was aired posthumously. Nothing. There's stuff in the Doctor Who papers, but I find that extraordinary now. I mean, if he had died now, say, I would be straight onto the Guardian and would probably be able to get him an obituary. Times change. This is actually, apart from the full length sort of wobbly gate thing going on, I like that shot, the way that Harper gets the camera sort of giddy and in and slightly blurred. And there it's in darkness in silhouette. There's some wise shooting going on there, and this is brilliant. I love the pan across the caves to give it some sense of length, and the Doctor sort of running as the camera runs and moves. That gives it a sort of sense of pace and slightly disjointedness. But when I was watching this with my mates, it didn't really recover. They really enjoyed finding that sequence crap. Again, it's that sort of joy. I mean, it used to frustrate me being with drama students who didn't really sort of respect the endeavour, the artistry or creativity in something, and see past it. It's a bit like going to the theatre and sort of going, well, yeah, but he's on the floor and he's still breathing and he's supposed to be dead. Well, yes, because you can't actually kill an actor. You haven't won by not seeing through the artifice. Anyway, this is a well-rehearsed conversation. This is very, very nice. Beautiful lighting here. The lighting is excellent. Although one suspects it would be slightly done. No, because you get the phosphorescence in a cave, and there's also probably lighting done by Jack and the military. This is really very well done. Nice use of level on the set. So the set design is it complements. It's sympathetic to what the director's trying to achieve. Davison has that wonderful insolence, which is quite a Tom Baker-y thing, actually, to be quite insolent in the face of posturing and power or threatening behaviour, to try and either disarm it or wind it up. And if you wind up somebody who is coolly threatening you, they suddenly, they lose their upper hand or could potentially make a mistake. So it's not just a character point. Well, it is a character point. It's what the Doctor does to undermine those who are, better positioned, better armed, more prone to violence than he, which I think is one of the great things about the character. You're a wily fellow. Again, it's that slightly old-fashioned dialogue that works. It doesn't seem out of place, and I like I remember this being quite fun as a kid. It felt like the story was suddenly, shifting its power structure. I wouldn't have thought of it like that as a kid. When suddenly you have Salatine escape, and so that means that the military have to use that cleverly in order that they make use of the fact that there's an android and they're now sort of potentially one step ahead. This is so brilliantly shot, and that slap. It's quite an un-Doctor Who-y thing. And look at the little bit of makeup on Davison's hand as well, because he's got the Spectrox sting. This is the sort of stuff that gets Eric Saywood going, having tear his arms out slowly, but actually you can do this without any blood and guts, without any there's no cut, there's no bleeding, there's no bloody teeth. It's violent, and yet it's totally it's not sexy for kids. It's not gory. It's it's something where it's the acting and the situation that emphasizes the pain and the danger without resorting to viscera. And look at the way every camera shot, him down on his knees, the two guns pointing in, just the way that Krelper's grabbing him is slightly. Does Stotts grab his head? No, but this feels. Stotts is slightly sweaty as well. This all feels, and you'll be worked over by experts. You imagine this world where there are people that are good at torturing people to get information. It just, every element of it complements the other in order to create the atmosphere that they're going for, which is one of grimness and danger. So the Armis plan didn't work for very long. I love Robert Glenister's weird, inhuman androidy looks, because they're kind of emphasised by the shooting of it, and it's not like you're going, well, why hasn't Shellac noticed that he's got this odd Leary thing going on? Because it's a bit more subtle than that, and I like it. I remember an interview with Robert Glenister when they said, is there a part I think you regret taking? And he said, Doctor Who, because I was in it years ago and people keep stopping me and asking me about it. And he's since been in it again in Nikolai Tesla's Night of Terror. And you go, so he didn't mean that. It was probably just something he said for an interview, to be honest, as well, and didn't realise that a lot of people would pour on that and take it very personally. He probably just went, I occasionally get stopped by Doctor Who fans. And of course, you can also have enjoyed a job and like a programme, but, one day when asked about something, go, I'm a bit fed up of being the only thing I'm asked about. That doesn't mean you don't like it. It just means you sometimes might wish sometimes somebody would get you to sign their sink or swim VHSs or whatever. And I do like the fact that, again, I think I mentioned this in episode 1, that Shellac would ordinarily be, the good guy. And I remember watching this as a kid. It seemed like, because you didn't pick up the subtleties quite so much, that Shellac was kind of the traditional good guy. He's the brigadier kind of figure. Yeah, and I know there's moral, ambivalence with the brigadier and the way that he's treated sometimes. But he was the traditional military figure who seemed as close to the sort of forces of good as anybody. And actually, he's pretty pragmatic and unpleasant. And the nice Salatine isn't particularly nice. And this is a great shot. This is a quite a straightforwardly staged scene. It's only a couple of camera angles, but it's really well done, and it gets the job done, and it imparts a little bit of information, and it's helping to increase the pace. They're making their way to the spaceship. The Doctor collapses. The Doctor fills them in that he's got Spectrox toxemia. And Stotts' response to be totally unsympathetic because this is a cruel world. But it's cruel without being, it's not too dour. It is quite grim, but there's a humour to it because the characters are real, and there's a sort of gallows humour to it, and there's a lightness to it because the characters are all quite colourful as well, but they're colourful without being caricatures, but they are slightly larger than normal and yet paradoxically, with the likes of Stotts and Krelper, they are quite earthy and believable in Doctor Who terms, because they seem to have come from a program where people are a bit more sort of gritty and realistic, but that in itself is so it's that paradox, isn't it, of something being larger than life and yet truthful, which I always like in this kind of drama, which is why I'm drawn to this kind of drama, I think. Because, and I've said this before, because just because something is, stage performances are larger than life, they have to be in order to project, but it doesn't mean you sacrifice the truth through that technique. It's just that you distill the truth and project it in a way that you don't when you're sitting around on a sofa. But also you're dealing with subject matter that is bigger than sitting around and talking on a sofa. And I'm sure there are mighty dramas set with people talking on sofas, and I probably will watch them, but not as often as I'll watch ones about drug running gangsters and becloaked bat cave beasts. And I remember just loving Stotts's headband as well, and I like the fact he then uses it to blindfold the Doctor. I saw John Normington play Albany in King Lear at the Royal Shakespeare Company, and he even then had that slightly staccato delivery that he does, that it would be wooden were it not such good acting. It's a deliberate sort of choice. And he's too interesting an actor for that. But if you just listen to the cadence of his voice, you'd go, oh, that's a strangely sort of almost flat delivery, but it's deliberately so. And look at his eyes. He's doing it all in the eyes, and the stillness is glorious. And again, he's the sort of actor. I love this. Why do I love it? I don't know. It's totally unnatural, and yet it works within its own terms, and it's Doctor Who. And you could sort of say, if I can have a bat monster in a cave, I can have a guy talking to the camera. And it says, go with it. And if you don't want to, that's fine. But I guess you lose. And I can understand if it's too much for some people. I'm not criticising anybody who goes, I don't really want people talking to the camera in Doctor Who. I don't really want people talking to the camera in Doctor Who. But in one Doctor Who story, when it's one particular character and everything else about that Doctor Who story works in a particular way, I accept this. Whereas if it was a Doctor Who story that I didn't think was very, very well made and that annoyed me, I might go, and now someone's talking to the camera. So, sometimes our justifications for things are entirely personal or contextual or whatever. Great model shot even, geostationary orbit. And again, just having the beginning of that scene over the model shot. This lighting is fantastic. Again, Harper's just thinking about because can you imagine this if shot with normal Doctor Who lighting, and even the light coming through this is more like something that's, I'm thinking of Terminus when they're in the grills there, and you get the lovely light coming through that, and you suddenly go, oh, this is a much better looking production because we're on film and you're able to do more with the lighting. Well, that's in the studio, and they've managed to do it with the lighting. So yeah, can you imagine that scene? It just wouldn't be the same. The fact that Maurice Reeves is so good. I wrote his obituary for The Guardian, didn't I? Yes, I did. Maurice Reeves. I walked past him in Edinburgh once, and didn't say anything, and I wish I had now. It was at the Fringe. It was when I was doing My Stepson Stole My Sonic Screwdriver, and he was there, but I didn't want to bother him. And of course, he was walking down the street. It probably would have been no bother. Although I did, speaking to his wife and his widow, Vanessa, she did say that he didn't mind getting stopped in the street so long as people didn't say that they'd enjoyed him in Taggart, because he'd never been in Taggart. I think he'd been offered something in it, or something hadn't worked out, or whatever. But because he was a sort of gritty-faced, and it had that delivery like he'd been chewing a wasp. In fact, that line was cut from my Guardian obit, I think, where I said he had he gave the impression he was chewing on a wasp or something, which I rather liked. That's beautiful. I like that bit with Jack hiding in the background, obscure. It's just lighting and smoke again, which on a normal Doctor Who set, not well lit, not augmented with smoke, would have looked a bit naff. And his wife Vanessa, but he'd never been in Taggart. So when people stopped him and said, "I loved you in Taggart," he got a bit pissed off. It's the opposite of Robert Glenister. Yeah, imagine Robert Glenister if people kept stopping you and saying they liked, could you talk to them about Doctor Who? You'd never actually been in it. And this is the plotting of this is very good because Morgus is forced to do what he does because he's got the wrong end of the stick because of the Doctor's presence. So although actually the Doctor and Perry are kind of on the periphery of this, they're very minor players in a way, but that's, I think, deliberate. It's not like some stories, particularly some Saywood stories, where the Doctor isn't very important to the story because Eric Saywood is more interested in his guest characters. I think this is deliberate from Robert Holmes that the Doctor's death is brought about as a result of something that happens really early in the first episode, an unfortunate brush with a poison. That's brilliant. I love the subtlety of that effect as well, the little bit of smoke coming on when he burns his hand. It's just little bits, attention to detail in what is how does he get out of the handcuff scene. Beautiful. But the Doctor and Perry being victims of this dirty war that's all about money is deliberate, and yet of course their presence in it does shift the dynamic and affect the outcome, even if not always from the Doctor's the Doctor being in control of the situation, as the Doctor is more so in many stories. They're very much innocent victims, as Shellac says, but he says it in a much more sort of cynical pragmatism, if you can have such a thing, a cynically pragmatic way, when he talks about in war the innocent die too, which is a get-out clause for people doing terrible things. And we're now approaching one of the great cliffhangers of Doctor Who, which I would be surprised if it's not the thing that Erica chooses, and that's nice. That just goes to show why Davison didn't need to spend the rest of things with manacles on his hand. But look at the outside. I mean, that's just the white studio outside, but the little bit of lighting on the cyc or whatever it is, the studio walls, that sort of purple haze to give a sense of some alien horizon is simple but beautiful, and it just because quite often in Doctor Who of this period, you see, I'm thinking of the roof of the spaceship in front of us. It's just they go, well, it's just the white studio, and you've got to take it, which I don't mind doing, but I also appreciate the effort here of and there's a few buildings out there as well. I've got a feeling the word floater appealed to my university friends as well. I liked these people; they were mates of mine, but I mean, you can find a double entendre in anything if you want to. I have to say, and I know I'm a comedian, I'm supposed to have a sense of humour, but there we go. Maybe I haven't got. In fact, a lot of comedians don't. I don't think do I have a sense of humour? I don't think I have. I think well, we don't have a sense of humour about the things we care about. I do have a sense of humour about Doctor Who, but it's complicated. I remember not really liking the CSO effect there, because obviously now you'd have him bouncing off the walls, wouldn't you? But actually, I think for the bit, and I love this exchange between the two, where they're clearly going through the motions of the things that you say. It's funny. It's deliberately funny. But actually, and the effect of the president going down, they do make an attempt to make him spin, and it's hard to do. And also, it's a program for kids. No, they wouldn't have been able to do much more than they did there. I thought it's reasonable. Oh, yeah, and I have the lift maintenance engineer shot. I mean, it's so bleak, and that happens to somebody. It's grim. And yet it's just a little line that does nothing apart from add that sort of bleakly comic, dark. Oh, it's brilliant. That's why Robert Holmes is so good, because his Doctor Who is scary and it's grim and it's violent, but all within the confines of being a children's television series. And yet the humour is, adult, cynical, caustic, and yet all within the safety of a children's television series. It's brilliant. Love Christopher Gable's body language is superb, of course, because he was a ballet dancer. He was so young, I think, when he died. Because he was touring. He was always, and he was directing. He's the head of the Royal Ballet or something, wasn't he? He was a highly acclaimed ballet dancer, director, etc., etc. And some friends of mine I've got a signed copy of the Caves of Androzani novel upstairs by him, but I never had the pleasure myself. But he was one that you sort of expected to be around a lot. I remember reading his obituary and going, gosh, so young. And he is very sympathetic, isn't he, Jack? And that's a brilliant mask. I mean, in lesser stories, that mask would be, first thing that you choose as being your best thing. It's a beautiful design. I'm never quite sure. I need to look at the face when we see it, because Christopher Gable is obviously not made up for the whole of this. He's just made up for the money shot, as it were. But you see quite a lot of his lower lip and that eye. And is it really that there's no burning makeup on those bits when we see the full reveal? Doesn't matter. I'm just blathering now. But one does. I thought the episode was about to end when the spaceship started to shudder. So I was winding down. This is such a beautiful piece of acting. And again, it's quite melodramatic, but it's totally true. And I love that twist of the, do you think I'm mad? No, of course you're not. I actually am. And do I frighten you? He says with kind of pity and threat in one voice. And you're so important to me also sounds utterly sincere and, oh God, so terrifying. And it's, I can feast my eyes on your delicacy. It's a very good depiction of sort of destructive love. Nothing he's saying or do, from his point of view, it's all you're beautiful and I love you and I would do anything to look after you, and terrible things have happened to me and I'm the victim here, and yet everything about him is threatening and terrifying, and it's so well judged. And just every single shot. We don't get shooting like this really in Jet being slightly out of focus there, very right in the foreground. And Nicola Bryant, by the way, is absolutely fantastic in this story. The Doctor and Perry as a leading pair are excellent in this story. Now I remember a review in Doctor Who magazine of one of the House Dammers Walker's book, I think, saying that that there being a precognizance of the Doctor's regeneration because it's the same effect, and the review going, I scribbled in my margin, that's a load of old rubbish. I remember me thinking, yeah, what a load of old rubbish. Then I think Graham Harper did an interview where he said, I deliberately put that effect there as precognizance of the Doctor's regeneration. So it just goes to show sometimes what you might think is rubbish isn't. And that we're all prone to being wrong about things. We could be wrong about when we think that other people are wrong. In fact, I did it to somebody recently where they sent me a thing and I went, no, that's wrong. You need to check that. And actually it turned out it was right. So, well, I don't know why I'm just go, yes, yes. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Don't try and cathartically share one's own shortcomings when one could be going, this cliffhanger is brilliant. I love the burning of the door that they had to do. I love the fact that Stotts burns his hand on the outer rim because it's hot because of the thing. I love the shaking of the ship. I love the shot from Stotts through to the Doctor. It's a brilliant angle, and the shuddering of the ship and the close-up of Davison and the fact that he closes his eyes and, stops his, move over to the door because I'll shoot you if you don't. All of that is so good. It's one of the great Doctor Who cliffhangers. I would be nuts if I did not choose it. Are there other things I could choose? Well, I mean, the brutality of the world, I think, is nice. That you've been messing with real Spectrox is not the response you expect when somebody says, I think I'm dying of this thing. Have the lifted maintenance engineer shot. The fact that Chelak is actually a wrong, and even though he's ostensibly the head of the forces of good, really. The looking at the camera, which I adore. Haven't even spoken really much about David Neal as the president, who's the smallest part in it, and yet perfect casting of somebody who looks like he's a younger man, an older man who's had his sort of life extended. It's a really good piece of casting, and he plays it, and he's a good actor. I mean, he leads in stuff. The funny exchanges between Morgus and Timin, all the beautiful lighting and shooting in the cave. I mean, even the shooting of that monster attack at the beginning, apart from when we see it in its sort of shambling, full length glory. When the camera sort of zooms in and judders and goes closer to the neck as it eats. I think it eats Les Conrad, doesn't it? Romulus and Remus's dad. Is all, that's all brilliant stuff. Those cave sets are very good. The lighting of them and the smoke just helps to sell them. I love that pan across as the Doctor's running through the caves. It feels quite, that, especially in such a limited space, that's a way of increasing the pace and increasing the space. And that sort of judderiness makes it sort of, gives you a little bit of motion sickness and adds to the fact that the Doctor's staggering and stumbling about. It's very cleverly done. So much is good, but it's got to be the cliffhanger. And I would be very surprised if Erica Lear had not chosen the cliffhanger to episode 3. Let's see.
Episode 3. Okay, well this is a bit of a girly crushy one, I'm afraid. The cliffhanger of episode 3 is not only my favourite bit from this story, but my favourite bit from the entire catalogue of Doctor Who. And I know there are grown up proper Doctor Who fans out there, but I'm afraid this is my favourite bit, and it's when Peter, my fifth Doctor, is tied up against the wall, and he uses the laser cutter to get himself out of the cuffs, and it burns him, and his hair just flicks up and flicks back down again, and I just think, gorgeous. So I'm afraid that's my one of my moments, I'm afraid. Funny story, I was chucked out of a local group meeting when people asked what your favourite moment was in Doctor Who, and of course this is what I said. I was chucked out for not taking it seriously, but hey ho, we can't all be the same.
Well, that opens up. So first I thought when she started, I thought, yeah, she's saying the end of episode 3. Oh no, she's saying the bit before the end of episode 3 where he cuts through the manacles. I'm going, well, I love that bit because I just love the whole way that it's staged, the way that it's done, the fact that he burns himself and you get that little thing of steam from showing him burning himself. Oh no, it's because he's a bit sexy when he flicks his hair. And I was a bit arrogant then, because as soon as she started talking, I thought, yeah, she's going for the end of episode 3. And by the time she finished, I was like, no, that's basically Erica doing her sexy Peter thing, which I did say she'd do, didn't I? I did say Erica would do a sexy Peter thing. But for her, that flick of the hair overshadows one of Doctor Who's greatest moments. But And you got thrown out of a local group. See, I've just said I've got no sense of humour when it comes to Doctor Who, but I have much more of a sense of humour when it comes to Doctor Who than a lot of people I see contributing to discussions about Doctor Who, particularly modern Doctor Who, where apparently you don't understand the programme if you don't like it in the same way that somebody else does. If Erica's favourite bit of Doctor Who is the bit where Peter Davison flicks his hair when he's trying to escape from manacles, there's absolutely nothing. I think Erica has proved that she's a Doctor Who fan. She loves Doctor Who. She organises Doctor Who conventions, and actually, you don't have to prove anything either. Let's not get into that. But you were chucked out of a local group for liking a particular thing about Doctor Who. Yeah, you're welcome to our gang. So great you like the same thing as us, but only if you like it in exactly the same way that we do. I take Doctor Who terribly seriously, way too seriously. But I also know it's not serious at all. It's very serious to me, and very important to me, and is quite an important anchor in various points of my life. And I get frustrated. I got very frustrated with my university friends for going floater, because I was largely expecting them to be intelligent people, and that's not an intelligent thing to say. And there's no reason everybody has to always say intelligent things, but I can be very childish myself. So it's all about context, isn't it? It's a bit like the looking at the camera bit. It works and it's brilliant, except for if it's in a context where it doesn't work in, it isn't brilliant, in which case it's terrible. But poor Erica. And it's certainly not what I would have gone for as my favourite thing, but whatever floats your boat. This desire for sort of purity when it becomes to, I mean, that's very much, I think, coming in political discourse, that you're either for us or against us, rather than you can have a complicated, nuanced thought processes about an important issue of the day. And yes, the idea that you if you like Doctor Who, you have to like it in a certain way or you're bad. I'd certainly disappointed if people say a Doctor Who story I like is bad and a Doctor Who story I think is bad is good, or they see different things in it from me, and sometimes it means I will then discount their opinions, but then I just won't bother to read what they're saying, or I'll read what they're saying and go, I don't agree with that. And sometimes I probably might think, I'm a bit of an idiot, but it certainly never makes me cross, or if it does make me cross, only on a sort of internal monologue level. But it's an odd one to care what anybody else thinks about, or how somebody manifests their joy of Doctor Who. Each to their own. It doesn't matter. I think I'm trying to overanalyze now, and I'm sure some people will be going, "Oh God, he doesn't half overanalyze things," and often in contradictory ways, which I very much hold my hand up to. Anyway, the long and the short of it is, Erica, you're an idiot. Get out. You're banned from this podcast. But in all of the brilliance of Caves of Androzani 3, getting your hot totty moment. Of course, she's absolutely welcome. A fool. So yeah, I mean, I think she's an idiot, but in a way that I don't really think she's an idiot, and I think she's a joy, but a joyful idiot, but not an idiot, but yeah, a bit of an idiot. And I was going to say, and of course she doesn't really mean that. She loves all the. I'm sure she does love all the other bits too. But I completely believe her that her favourite bit of all of Doctor Who is the bit when Peter Davison flicks his hair. And you know what? Somebody liking a thing is good, whatever it is. I mean, not fascism, genocide. But Peter Davison's sexy look is neither of those things. It's anyway. I hate you, Erica, in a way that doesn't involve any hatred whatsoever. So I thought she was going to say episode 3. There's no way I'm going to win when people play the game like this. But I thoroughly enjoyed all of that. It's so high quality. I mean, after the opening scene, which took my university friends about 10 minutes to get over. And I used to say, I like these people, but it was so disappointing. A lot of them work in television and theatre now. Yeah, mine is an industry where a lot of people work in it who have utter contempt for it, or it when it's done by other people. But there we go. Anyway, good. I enjoyed that very much. I like television and I like Doctor Who, and I appreciate it when it's done well and managed to. I don't know. Yeah, and I can. I can easily forgive a monster here or there, or the use of the word floater, when there's so much to enjoy that's actually good and deliberately good and is the work of great creative minds and a lot of technical competence, confidence and invention. Beautifully written, beautifully directed, beautifully acted. I'm enjoying the Caves of Androzani, and I'm not going to let you stop me now. Well, hello everybody, and it's time for the final part of my sojourn to Androzani Major and Minor, with a complete one-off Erica Lear. I mean, she's got to be a complete one-off. The universe cannot contain more than one. What a jolly, scatty pile of energy she is. Good fun to be around. A game contributor to this. Unsurprisingly, eschewing anything sensible for as many mentions of how sexy Peter Davison is, which is not going to be high on my list of things that I will be eulogizing about the Caves of Androzani. So it just goes to show we all enjoy the program in different ways. So welcome to part 4 of the Caves of Androzani, or as it's doubtless known to Erica, the Peter of Peter, or the sexy Peter of sexy Peter. And see what happens in lovely Peter's final episode of Be Quiet. Be quiet. Sorry, I'm being heckled by the robot lady, whose name I will not mention, because when I do, I will activate yours, and that's how they intend to take over the world. But I'd actually, for the first time in ages, I'd remembered to lower her volume in order that I did not invoke her during the opening titles of the episode and therefore activate yours. So I'd got it all in place, and she's obviously taking umbrage and is giving me shtick. But she stopped now, the speaker who shall not be named. So I hope you have lined up your final Peter Davison episode, The Caves of Androzani Part 4. I am going to press play in 3, 2, 1. And of course, this, whilst it is the last Peter Davison episode of Doctor Who, it is not the last episode in which Peter Davison gets top billing as Doctor Who, because that has passed. That is episode 3 of The Caves of Androzani. That is the last time the Doctor, Peter Davison, is the first slide on the closing captions, because Colin Baker gets first billing on Peter Davison's last episode. I mean, I think, it tends to be that the newest Doctor always gets top billing, but I think I would be slightly sad if I were Peter. I'm sure Peter Davison doesn't care. He doesn't strike me as somebody that gives a monkey about such things. But I would kind of go, I'm in last episode. Let me have top billing in my last episode. Anyway, we are picking up off universally acknowledged as the one of the high-end cliffhangers in the whole of Doctor Who history, but as Erica has pointed out, one that exists in the shadow of a bit where Peter Davison flicks his hair. But what a brilliant build-up of tension! The shuddering camera, the burning of the wrists. That shot is absolutely fantastic. The depth of field of the camera and everything. and the urgency of the performance, and you sort of buy why, because quite often it's, why doesn't the baddie just kill him? Well, I think there's enough to suggest, well, he doesn't want to be shooting, when a guy's at controls of his spaceship. Babe Davison throws himself backwards and forwards, then has a moment to sort of slightly regain consciousness, because he's, you can tell he's sort of bursting behind the eyes with the illness. He conveys that. And I like the way that Maurice Reeves picks up the handcuff as if to go, so that's how he escaped. It's all there. Every single shot has either a piece of interaction or a piece of character or a little bit of plot emphasis. Never has a Doctor Who quarry looked so good. This is quite a protracted gun sequence we have here, and I loved these guns as a kid. For some reason, just the augmentation of the oozes with the gas canisters seemed very grown up to me. Sand, that's again quite un-Doctor Who. We don't always see bullets hitting their target or taking chunks out of things. Certainly not in classic Doctor Who. Occasionally one or two, but because I have to set a charge for every time there's one of those. And this is nice, a nice quiet moment for Stotts. I did like Maurice Reeves. He was definitely my favourite character when I watched this first time around. Just because he seemed like he was from a grown-up program. Now one of these soldiers gets a few lines later on. He's called Ian Staples, and I was actually put in touch with Ian. He's a work colleague of someone that I'm in touch with, and but it was just getting to the back end of Who's Round. That's him, Ian Staples there, and I'm afraid I don't think I ever did get in touch. I got to the point where I was so tired, and I have dropped the ball on a few things, and it's odd because I sometimes have pointed other people in the direction of some people and say, did you ever contact that person? They go, oh no, I didn't. I go, well, why didn't they do that? But I've got my fair share of those as well. Time sort of runs away, and all of this is stuff one does in one's spare time. It's not my living. He says, as somebody that went on Patreon during lockdown, but that's slightly different. But generally the Doctor Who stuff is my hobby. This is brilliant. It is such an ignominious death, and brilliantly done, and I like the way he takes the trouble of sort of being thrown backwards by the force of the machine gun, but it's not. There's a slight arrogance to what Salatine does in that he drops his guard and he goes, it's fine, but he checks his body, checks for the pulse, and he's dead. But I do love that kind of no, it's going to be fine, and then just no heroics, nothing special, just mown down. And we're only a couple of minutes into the episode, and one of the characters that we've got to know, and kind of he's had that journey of being Jack's prisoner and coming back and then being in a position to help Chelak, and the tides are turning, and then no, just poof. Yeah, you're wiped out. So here are Jerry O'Brien and Roy Holder chasing Peter Davison. Both actors died in the same year, the year before last, as I record this. So I was able to keep them both together in my in memoriam video. That's Gareth Milne doing the fall down there. We need to see an interview with Gareth Milne. He's not featured on any of the DVD or Blu-ray extras, and he was Peter Davison's stunt double. That's a fantastic shot. I think there is an argument that in the brilliant staging of that chase, some of the angles make Krelper and Jerry O'Brien's non-speaking mercenary chap seem quite close to Davison. So although we've got the lovely thing of the bullets flying and the sand bursting up, there is a kind of, can they really not hit him from there? But actually those oozes, I think are quite those short, if they're short guns that do bursts of bullets, they're not the easiest to aim. And some of the angles, I think that it pulls off very convincing, but I don't think always entirely. And poor old Roy Holder is having to do a bit of keep up, as though he's sort of drilling a platoon, whereas he's actually just yelling at his mate. But I think they just about get away with it. But I think those who are inclined to be picky, and certainly not Weers, would be going, oh, they could have, could they not hit a barn door? Which is always a criticism of, most action programs where people are firing guns, in that if they hit everybody they aimed at, there wouldn't be much room for drama. Although actually, I'm not sure how easy it is to hit people with guns, especially machine guns held at hip height whilst you're running at the same time. But anyway, I think the giddy sort of camera work is beautifully done. Harper's clearly sort of planned that and enjoyed shooting it, and it's a good sequence. And then we have the contrast of it's much darker here, and the cameras are much closer, and it does feel like everything's closing in, and. Jack, I mean, I know we have that stuff of Morgus sort of turning to camera, but Jack is kind of narrating his stuff here as well. He's kind of saying that he's sort of talking to himself, but he is keeping us in on it. And I love this bit because I think you see, this could look awful, and I like the way when he fires, you see sort of bits flying about, because there's not much space in that studio, and there's not much room for any new kind of sets. So it could just look like your two remaining actors from these scenes kind of facing off like the Sea Devils and the guys in the sea base in Warriors of the Deep, where they're 3 foot away from each other, missing each other, but Harper shoots it well enough, and having Jack there kind of hiding in a crevasse while he's sort of busying about trying to lay up his defences, and then suddenly Chelak's there and he's in a knock and he's firing and he's on the run, and it's it's frenetic as you can get with multi-camera. So this is how they shoot soap opera, this is how they shoot sitcom, and we're doing Doctor Who's equivalent of a sort of war movie. And I think it's really well done. And this is nice, suddenly having these two characters where you've got the sort of cold, glassy-eyed, but apparently, but very civilized Morgus, and you've got the pragmatic, dirty Stotts, but who essentially then says to his, is that I love the way this relationship turns, and he later on, doesn't he? He just goes, you're just a man with a gun, and Stotts is keen to sort of go, yeah, you do what you want, whatever, but I've got your number, pal. I'm not going to make a big deal of it. At the end of the day, I want to get out of here alive and with some money. I seem to recall in the book, in that bit later where he says you're just a man with a gun, we're going to split it half and half. I'm sure Terence Dick says, and Morgus works out of, and Morgus agrees, and then in his mind is working out a way of getting rid of Stotts so he gets to keep it all. But yeah, I don't like the idea of Morgus getting one and over on Stotts. I actually quite like it that they're both pragmatists who have both got the level of one another, and if they had got to the position where Morgus could have tried to kill Stotts and betray him at the end, but Stotts would have seen that coming and would have made a contingency whereby they both get. There's another universe where neither of them get killed and they both go off with their 50%. That's the happy ending. That's a decent effect shot, and again, the way that the close-ups and everything there are filmed of Davison are fantastic. And now Chelak's in, yeah. I like the way that he fires. Jack manages to fire a shot off, but he's trying to keep Perry safe. Poor old Nicola Bryant doesn't get an awful lot to do other than be a bit poorly and be covered in a blanket in this episode. But it is a bit of a sort of macho bloodbath, isn't it? Here's a sign of not judging by appearances, Chelak, because if you weren't so upset by Sherazjek's face, you wouldn't have just got caught in the mud yourself. I remember Graham Harper, I think, saying in an interview that he felt Chelak's death was slightly botched, and it's not entirely clear what's going on. They sell it, but I think he'd wanted to show, with more finality that Chelak's getting, washed away by the mud, and it with a wipe or something, but it doesn't quite happen. I think that's beautiful. The fact that she screams at him as Chelak has just done, but the handheld camera that backs away as he goes and hides under the table because of her fear at his physiognomy I think is very touching. Is that the movement of the camera there is absolutely beautiful. and it's not just the bad guys that recoil in horror at Jack. The nice old Perry does as well, and that that is the key to what is wrong with a lot of us now. I suspect my other half would go, but the cliche of the person with a deformity being twisted mentally by other people's reactions and that making them do bad things is an ableist cliche, and I would perhaps find it difficult to argue with that these days. But I think it's done very well here, and in isolation of all those other things that I know that are important about disability, etc., etc. I think within the context of this, it works. Although I wouldn't argue with anybody that had a difference of opinion, especially if they are people that have had to put up with the sort of assumptions and dismissals and recoiling that people with difference and disability have to put up with. But what a brilliant camera move! What an excellent performance from Christopher Gable. You do feel sorry for Jack, and I don't mean pity, patronising. I mean you empathise with him, even though he's the bad guy. One of the bad guys. Is he the bad guy? Well, no, not everyone's shades of grey. Stotts and Morcus are horrible, but then you kind of like him. And I kind of like the fact that Stotts hates Krelper and Krelper hates Stotts. And it kind of makes sense that these guys go, do you know what? We're not going out there now. There's all sorts of dangers out there. We've got what we want. We're men of limited needs. And of course, the real reality of it is, the story doesn't really need Krelper anymore because Stotts has got Morgus to talk to. But Robert Holmes, being Robert Holmes, goes, well, they could easily have gone all four of them, and Krelper and the other one could have been, killed by the dragon or blown away by one of the dummies or whatever. It's much more fun to to do this. And again, it's so simply done. They've let their guard down, they have a chat, and he very slowly walks back. But I remember the vicar going, well, why would he shoot? He's going to damage his spaceship there if he shoots there. Well, you can sort of go, well, no, he's close enough to just hit them. And the controls were a little bit to the left. And, just come on, it's a really good scene. It's a really, lovely moment of kind of... violence, but and cruel that is utterly in keeping with that character and those two characters' interactions, and just like the good bits for the good bits, and not sort of try and see the bad interpretation. I really do. Why do people? And I'm not a goody-goody, but why people watch things with a constant desire to pick holes? You don't win. You don't win. There's any number of reasons why it's okay for him to shoot in that space, if you want it to be. There's also any number of reasons for it not to be okay. Fine, but we can't... does the scene work because he walks up and slowly lets off the shots and then grins and walks off? Or does he then need to walk up to Morgus and go, now you may be thinking, Morgus, why did I shoot them in the control room of my spaceship? But actually that corner there's no important equipment anywhere. Do you know what I mean? Just fill in the blanks yourself and fill them in sympathetically to the program, or don't. But when program makers don't just not think of a lot of this stuff, they hope that you're invested enough in the drama that they don't keep having to slow it down to explain it all to your satisfaction every step of the way. Because I think sometimes if people had what they sometimes demand of program makers, they wouldn't like what they were given because it would be terribly boring. But anyway, I think I'm preaching to the converted, but sometimes it's cathartic to get it out. Quite nice that the celery gets... where I come from, it's a powerful restorative, of course, because in episode 1 we've had the gases in the Praxis range of the spectrum, and the Praxis range of the spectrum is from Praxis typewriter, isn't it? But I think the celery. Can we talk about the celery for a... It's a weird choice, isn't it? Why? I do quite like Davison's costume now. I wasn't wild about it back in the day. I still think the cricket jumper ties it too much to one century and indeed one sport, whereas actually the jacket and the trousers don't, if you don't want them to. I think it's the piping on the jumper that is, you could see that in any school playing field at the time, or variations thereof, and I think it just too time and place specific. But I nonetheless, I still think it's quite a nice costume. But who thought? Yeah, and what we really need is, I mean, did they reject other vegetables? Was there half an aubergine? Was there a sort of scattering of pomegranate seeds? I mean, what did they do? Was there a star? They could have. Yeah, this is where I wear my star fruit for mathematical excellence in fruit and in fruit and veg in pounds and ounces. And the love, you don't get lighting as dark as this. You don't get close-ups like this either. Harper's so bold as to go really, really close in and do profiles and sweat on people's faces and say hair on Sharazjek's hands. It's really good. Really, really good. And of course, what's, Davison's sacrifice, yes, the death is, poor dragon, we have to see the dragon killed off. Mercifully brief appearance from the dragon, and mercifully stationary one, flat on his back. But the Doctor's death, it's initiated by as with Salatine's death, something, a death, a terrible, the most final, decisive ending, death. But the Doctor's this incarnation's death is initiated by a tumble into a sticky fuzzy ball. But that would be too much bathos, I think. So he does actually get a hero's journey here. He sacrifices his life to save his friend, and that means that in this final episode, as the murder and mayhem is going on around him, he goes to milk a bat. He goes to grapple with bat udders. Is that what Lord Melchett calls Edmund in General Melchett calls? Hello, bat udders. I remember the Vicar as well, and I don't know, I keep quoting the Vicar because, recap, I watched these at the Vicar's house because he was kind enough to video Doctor Who for me because I was away at school because Mum had to go back to work and couldn't get me on, couldn't pick me up from the school bus, so I went and stayed at a local boarding school paid for by a charity. So it meant I missed Doctor Who and watched it at the Vicar's at the weekend, and some of his comments have stuck with me. Well, I mean, he's essentially the mouthpiece of God, so you take heed of what he says. But he had a criticism of the milking, but we'll come to that later. So let's have a look at, because I'm sure, look, his lip's a bit green, which it isn't when it's under the mask. But anyway, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because it's not. It's not really like the flesh has been peeled away and you can see the bones and the sinews underneath, which you would probably do now. He's just a bit sort of green and melty, which, considering people's reactions to him, it's quite light stuff. I quite like the single shots that Stotts is letting off here. But then, of course, we forgot about the android Salatine, and he comes in and shoots Stotts. I remember showing this to my university friends as an example of violence in Doctor Who, and them all finding this terribly funny. Whereas I remember, to me, it's the most sort of action-packed and sort of grim finale to a Doctor Who. But if you're not used to television drama shot in a studio, I suppose maybe it does look quite comical when people get shot and fall over, but and I think the decision to have Salatine hold him like that, and then his job done, it doesn't know what to do. I think that's a beautiful image, and the flame in front of the camera. But that sort of doll-like Salatine, sort of stuck with his dead master in his hands, is a beautiful directorial and performance choice. And the Doctor, he's met and encountered all of these people in this adventure, but he hasn't got time. He slips through the bloodbath and picks up his friend, and takes her back to the TARDIS. And you could quibble and go, well, why doesn't he give it to her now? And I suppose you go, well, he's got to get in and safe. He's got to get them off and safe. Make sure that she's on a journey rather than stranded on Androzani should anything happen to him. Again, you can rationalise it all, and it would be really boring if he had to sit and explain every one of his choices to the satisfaction of a cynical viewer. And I remember a friend of my mum's at work, her son had liked Doctor Who, so I'd written him a letter listing my top 10 and least favourite 10 stories or whatever, because it was de rigueur to suddenly start listing things you didn't like, and he listed Caves of Androzani in his bottom 10, and he cited, one of the reasons he cited was because when the TARDIS took off, the explosion goes off. He goes, well, that was lucky timing, wasn't it, that it exploded just after the TARDIS left. You go, but that's just a nice bit of direction. And also it could be said that the TARDIS was suppressing the seismic event until it went and released it. However, again, you can find reasons to be generous, and it's not like it was a mistake. It actually it's a nice directorial touch that keeps the action going and shows what they're leaving behind, the chaos and the tumult that they are leaving behind for the sanctuary of the TARDIS. So again, but again, I think you're sympathetic when stories you like do things, and you're prone to be more critical when stories you don't like do things. So, but anyway, I did think I'm not sure I ever bothered to. I must have replied to him, but I don't think I pursued that friendship via correspondence as rigorously as I might have done, because I thought that was a poor point on which to hang an excellent story. Might regenerate, he says. And yes, so what the vicar says was, well, why didn't he drink some of the bat milk while he was there? And my argument would be, he got all the bat milk that there was. There was only enough milk in the bat for one person, and he gave it to Perry. And he does say, only enough for you. Now, you can say, only enough in the test tube for you. He should have got some more out of the bat. Or you could go, only enough in the bat for you. And I choose that one. This was an odd decision to choose to hire the actors to come back in. Means that the actor's got a nice little bit of extra work. We often forget that, Sarah Sutton is in the Caves of Androzani. Not a clip. She actually comes back to do it. It means the Doctor's last word is Adric. I don't actually think this is a great regeneration, because you don't see it happen. I don't think the effect is... I think the effect in Logopolis is much more emotional and layered, because you see the sort of layers giving away. So much as I love Harper's direction, I'm not... this is fine, this regeneration. I remember it being very exciting at the time, but you don't really see it happen. So I think there are better examples of its kind. Although actually, a lot of them are just crossfades from one to the other. But the Logopolis is my favourite regeneration from the classic era. Anyway, nice to have Colin right up and close, and that's a nice touch to have him in the closing titles, to say he has arrived. But as I say, it's a bit of a shame for Davison. And then and then everybody gets has gone from having single slide to being on a double, because we've got far more cast members to fit in because of the rehiring of Ainley, Waterhouse, Sutton, Fielding, Strickson, and Gerald Flood, renowned classical actor Gerald Flood, coming back to be the voice of Bad Decision Chameleon. John Walker, excellent film cameraman, and great work on that. And Alan Arbuthnot, Alec Wheel, these were names to conjure when I was reading the credits as a boy. Excellent piece of television, excellent piece of Doctor Who, one of the best Doctor Who stories of all time. I think it stands up very, very well indeed, and is a if I was Peter Davison, I would be very pleased that I got to go out on that high. Not every Doctor Who story can be like that. Its grimness is as a counterpoint to the zany, zestful adventuring that Doctor Who does much of the time. But seeing as the norm of that time was paced in a much more pedestrian manner, was much less ambitious in terms of depth of character, sometimes of pacing, of of staging of the drama of not only in terms of the visuals, but again in terms of pace and in terms of atmosphere, and also Robert Holmes knew how to write Doctor Who, and a lot of that is very funny, but it's funny within its own caustic, sardonic, violent, cruel world, and it is about as cruel and grim as Doctor Who gets. The mistake maybe was Eric Saywood realizing how good those stories were and then trying to do that all of the time. And of course, pendulum swing, it's like with comedy. As soon as, somebody does a bit of comedy that nobody's been doing for a while, it seems fresh and amazing. People go, oh God, we want more of that. And then of course, because people are quite unimaginative, by people I mean television executives, quite unimaginative, they go, let's have all things like that and nothing that isn't like that. And then everybody goes, we're a bit fed up of all of that. And then somebody does something else that hasn't been done for a while, and they went, oh yeah, we want all of that now. Whereas actually, of course, the beauty of Doctor Who is that you can follow Planet of Fire with Caves of Androzani, and then follow Caves of Androzani with the Twin Dilemma, and I mean, you couldn't get three more different adventures, I don't think, or different styles, and purely in terms of being, what it is as a production. Caves, towers above both of those, even though Fiona Cumming doesn't really do anything wrong with Planet of Fire, but it's not in the same league in terms of dramatics, and they're aiming for different things. Planet of Fire is trying to say interesting things about religion, just says them quite slowly. Anyway, but they're both on a sort of sand-blasted planet, but they both go for very very different things going on them. Anyway, look, I love the Caves of Androzani. I have to choose a favourite thing about that episode. I also have to choose a favourite thing overall. Well, I think I'm going to work backwards. I think my favourite thing overall, so that I don't forget, and because it's a unique pairing really, because Peri isn't a companion in Planet of Fire. She is the new character coming in. So I'm maybe bending. It doesn't matter. My rule, my house, my rules. It's the Fifth Doctor and Peri, who I think are a brilliant pairing. I think they're both excellent in that. I think both of their performances are flawless. The only slight false note is when Nicola Bryant says glass in that first scene, and that's because it's been robbed of its context of the opening TARDIS scene, where I think he said glass and she's mimicking how he's done that. But because we lose that, there's that slightly awkward moment that's uneasy on the ear, makes you go, what? And I have to say credit, and I think Nicola Bryant does a very good job with Peri's American accent. I remember it was pretended at the time that she was American, and that was how she spoke. And I remember being with her with an American fan. I was talking to Nicola. I didn't know her very well at this point, and this American fan said, "Yeah, you didn't fool us for a moment." And I was like, "Why would you say that in front of one?" I think it's a perfectly good American accent, and maybe if you're an American, you might pick up things. But remember, it's an American accent for British television as well, which is slightly different, because actually sometimes I've done a lot of work with accents, certain accents where you go for 100% authenticity actually sound wrong on the ear. This was an important lesson I was taught by a dialect coach when I was doing a Canadian play, and one of the actresses had the word immoral, and it was because it was Canadian, because it was North American. She should have said immoral, something. She should have sort of rounded the O, and she didn't. She went immoral, and he said that's actually wrong. But if she does it correctly, it will sound wrong to our ears, and attention will be drawn to the accent. It was a really interesting lesson about sometimes you have to bend the rules slightly in order to get the right cadence for the ears of the people that you're doing it to. And there's been a couple of occasions in The Archers, which is a radio drama, where I remember once there was a Scottish character and once there was a French character, and Radio 4 got loads of letters going, well, that actor's Scottish accent is awful, and that French guy, he sounds just so wrong, it's a terrible accent. And it was a French actor using his own accent and a Scottish actor using his own accent. So again, it's that thing of sometimes audiences are quite keen to pick up on things, even though the factual basis of their observation is incorrect. But the main point of that story was of this one of why has this person said this to Nicola Bryant to her face in the first place, regardless of whether her interpretation is correct, whether the audience member's interpretation is correct or not of Nicola Bryant's accent, which, as I say, sounds fine to me. It's the fact that you'd say it to that actor who might have a certain amount of pride in their craft and not want to be told that you thought a thing, even if you that a thing that they were doing, you didn't think they did very well, and sort of casting yourself as a hero. And you go, yeah, you didn't fool us for a moment. And also, but why you would say that to that person? What could possibly be? How could that person's day be made any better by you saying that to them? Why? What? And it wasn't the person deliberately going, I'm going to have a go at Nicola Bryant. It was actually quite a nice chat that they were having, but they said that thing that. And I don't think they realised it. If you'd done that to me, if you'd come up to me about a performance I'd given and said, that aspect of it, that wasn't very good, I would be desperately hurt. And credit to Nicola Bryant, who took it absolutely in her stride, was very, very, very polite back. And then when the person went away, I went, I don't effing believe that. And she was very magnanimous and very, very down to earth and very, took it in a way that I don't think I would have myself. And I think all credit to Nicola Bryant for that, who, as I say, I think her accent is good, but I also think her performance in Caves is stunningly good. And she actually doesn't get that much to do in episode 4. But I think all her interactions with Jack are superb, and I think the relationship between the Fifth Doctor and Perry is brilliant. And I would have liked to have seen more of them on telly, because I think they're a really good pairing. So my bonus thing for Caves of Androzani is the Fifth Doctor and Perry as a team, which is a short-lived team on screen, who I think are among the strongest TARDIS pairings of all time. Davison, I can't praise as an actor enough. Didn't like his Doctor at the time because he wasn't Tom Baker. I've said this a lot. I think he's an extremely accomplished character actor. He now says he was too young for Doctor Who. I don't think he was. I think he's an old man in a young man's body. I think he's witty, he's funny, he's got that breathless energy. He keeps the pace going all the time in those stories. Often, many times, which, there's a lot of wandering up and down beige corridors to do. He keeps the intensity going, sometimes through the sheer force of his performance alone. And I buy that he's an intelligent, sometimes waspish, sometimes fretful, and slightly eccentric, but wise, ancient time traveller. I think he's great. I think he's an excellent Doctor. And when I was younger, was a stupid idiot. But even when I was younger, I loved this story. But as I say, I was quite surprised to learn it was the best story ever until I, came to watch it again and went, oh no, I can see why people like this. And it's a story that I would, even now, I would watch for pleasure, and marvel at the brilliance of individual shots, because there's a bit, isn't there, when he's running on the running on through the sand. Is it during the chase, or is it when he's running back to Jack's cave or whatever? There's a bit, and the camera sort of moves along with him, and there's a wow, a kind of a sort of almost westerny, chasey refrain in that rattlesnake music of Roger Limbs that just seems so right, and it seems like you've seen and heard that combination in movies, but never in Doctor Who, and again, it just kind of elevates Doctor Who to be doing things with bigger budgets and bigger exposure and were watched by proper grown-ups and everything did, and that makes you feel elated and lifted by your show that often is made with lots of imagination and drive, but often a real sense of compromise and sometimes desperation. But that, I think Harper elevates everything, and I love that. That great giddy filming that he does, and yeah, Roger Lim's score is superb as well. But yeah, so Davison and Nicola Bryant as my bonus thing, as my all-round thing. And remember, it might be that, if I choose something before Erica chooses it, so if she chooses something now as her overall thing that I've chosen from a previous episode, I get the points for that, because the odds are stacked against me. Very Androzani-like, the chances of getting out alive for me in Happy Times and Places are very slim. So I need some. So yeah, if I've chosen something before Erica, even if I've chosen it a couple of episodes ago, I do get the point for that. I'm not going to win this because she's already outsmarted me with her, by playing the sexy Peter Joker on episode 3, when most sensible people would have chosen the cliffhanger. What's the other bit? I mean, I could choose. Do I choose the whole cast for episode 4? There's individual characters that I like. I love that last image of Jack in the arms of Salatine, and the kind of the kind of shut down marionette that Salatine becomes because his master is dead, and that sad final image of that beautiful, very statuesque physique, flopped into the arms of an inert robot is there's something very moving about that, especially with that flame, and then the fact that it goes out of focus, and even the soundscape. The sound is beautifully done as well. Attention to detail, Graham Harper. Thank you very much. I do like that last image. Stotts for me was the best thing about it when I was a kid. So kudos to Maurice Raves. But I think all of the cast are good. I think the fact that everyone in it is excellent, right down to bottom of the credits, David Neal as the president. So do I just say the cast? What will Erica? Erica's been choosing individual moments. But she might just say Peter Davison blooming ankles for all I know. There's no point trying to see how I can outmaneuver Erica. I do think it's a strong cast. But then again, what about Robert Holmes? The fact that it's written by Robert Holmes is key. It's Robert Holmes' return to Doctor Who since The Power of Kroll, which has quite a few similarities as a story, and just goes to show how the same set pieces, subject matter, kind of characters, with a few tweaks here and there, can be very, very different and bring different rewards and or penalties. Although, as listeners to Happy Times and Places will know, I'm quite fond of many aspects of The Power of Kroll. But I suspect if Graham Harper had directed it, those scenes where they're looking on the on the radar at the Bagual would have been much more tense than dear John Leeson going, "Oh well, this storm's going to be a daddy." But anyway, it would have been George Sweeney sweating and punching the screen. But listen, so Robert Holmes, the cast, that image, that chase. I love that chase. That the fact that the only survivors, I think it's the discontinuity guide say it, don't they? That Perry and Timmin are the only survivors of a male bloodbath, and Timmin's deposing of Morgus is glorious. And I like that, Stotts is, you're just a man with a gun now. And I do like that sort of uneasy truce between the two. All the characters are great. Oh, I could go on. Oh, I think I probably have been. I could just say it's the Caves of Androzani, couldn't I? I'd just go, it's the Caves of Androzani. It's just flipping great. My favourite thing about episode 4. This isn't an official document. This isn't something that matters. So I don't. Sometimes I think, well, I must say the cast because they deserve to have their credit made. Their brilliance made official. This isn't an official document. This isn't some sort of golden laurel that will go down in history. Just what did you like, Toby? So I'm going to go for the image of Jack in the arms of Salatine, because I think that sums up a lot of what is superior about this story. That kind of attention to detail, that kind of emotional investment in the characters, that kind of grimness, because it is a beautiful image, and yet the Doctor just runs past it, picks up Perry and sods off. The fact that it goes out of focus, so that what it sounds like as well. It's just a tiny moment that encapsulates the class of the entire production. And I'm sure Robert Holmes will get his dues elsewhere, as will all of those actors. And yeah, get over yourself, Toby. So, for episode 4, the image of Sharazjek in the arms of Salatine, the robot Salatine, and my overall thing is the relationship between Peter Davison as Doctor Who and Nicola Bryant as Perry, and that winning pair. And I mean, now I know I've just said Nicola Bryant and winning, but I mean the winning pair that is Peter Davison and Perry, not any other sort of quiet at the back. So, right, Erica is, I just need to line Erica up. Erica's favourite thing about episode 4.
Episode 4. Well, I just think the romantic side of me. I just like the way the Doctor got the bat's milk and saved Perry. I think it was just beautifully done. Him fighting not only his own illness from spectroxoxemia, but fighting to get the bat's milk, fighting to save Perry. And this was a situation that he stumbled upon. He wasn't sent, or he didn't meddle. He just found himself, as he says, in this local war. And I just like the good old-fashioned storytelling of him getting the antidote and rescuing the girl. Okay, so a kind of special thing to mention, that this is the first ever regeneration I witnessed. I was a bit too young to remember Tom to Peter, but this was my first regeneration of actually watching an episode go out and the new Doctor coming in. And I remember feeling very sad, and then the excitement of here's the new Doctor, here he is, and I just remember the thrill and the excitement of seeing it for the first time. And I didn't get to see another one then until Sylvester McCoy turned into Paul McGann, because we didn't get a Colin one. So I was glad to see an actual live regeneration. Okay, so that's been my unusual picks for the podcast. I hope that's all right, Toby.
Oh, don't worry, Erica. Some people have chosen more unusual things than that. I think yours were perfectly reasonable. I do think your choice of Peter Davison's death being, because he stumbled upon something, which fits with the tone of that piece, is a good choice, because, it is an heroic gesture in what is a relatively minor skirmish. But of course, it doesn't matter how minor it is if the stakes are high, because you're invested in the characters and the situation is made as tense as possible. You don't need to destroy universes if you don't want to. And I think it's important for Doctor Who to occasionally go, no, we can get great drama out of a local war. We don't have to destroy half the universe and then forget to put it back in order to give a sense of scale. And I would argue that actually there's more of a sense of scale because you feel every individual death in that in a way that you don't when you see, a planet blotting out that you've never been to. So I think it's instructive for Doctor Who to sometimes realise that it can tell a story with relatively small stakes. Not even the Earth is under threat in the Caves of Androzani, which is the sort of cardinal rule of New Who, and an understandable one, and one I have a huge deal of sympathy for. But actually, that Robert Holmes is capable of breaking all of the rules and still making it work. And also the fact that it's relatively small stakes, the fact that there's a lot of unluckiness that goes into Davison's demise, has a sort of dramatic cussedness to it. It works within the tone of that piece, and Harper's given it the correct tone for that to go. It's a sort of pointless death, as many are in stupid wars and stupid battles over money and drugs and whatever. And the Doctor's essentially just caught in the crossfire, which is pretty grim, but it's a grimness that works because it means that you feel it and you feel the pointlessness of it. And that creates this sort of grimy, sweaty, unfair, unjust world of this particular story in a series which can often be about somebody in a brightly coloured coat arriving on a planet and going, indubitably I shall be getting into the affairs of these strangely hatted people, and it's all a bit sort of jolly and sometimes silly. So it's a great leveller in that way, the Caves of Androzani, that I think does the series some good. But as I say, you wouldn't want it to always be like that. And yes, the first regeneration I can totally understand, and I was a bit hard on the regeneration. But again, this is entirely personal, isn't it? The first regeneration I saw was Tom Baker's, and that is very, very well done. And also, the flashbacks are clips to old stories. And I was, when I was being brought up, anything that had a clip from an old story automatically made that episode better, because it was something from before when things were better, and not like the present, which has me in it, which I loathe. So we're all a product of our own external and internal stimuli. So actually, there's nothing wrong with the Davison debate. It is actually one of the best regenerations, because at least it has some, it has a pace and a rhythm, and it builds to a climax in a way that some of those simple crossfades don't, and in a way that some of those ones where it's botched because we don't see it, or one of the actors wasn't there, or whatever, and all the new ones are pretty much the same. So so actually, I'm almost regret what I said at the end of this, 10 minutes ago, in the whole great mosaic, in the whole great pantheon of Doctor Who changes of lead actor. It's probably one of the most effective. It's just, I think, for me, having sucked on the teat of Logopolis, I found the taste of what came from the udders of the Caves of Androzani was not as satisfying. Wow, I don't know where that went, and I'm not particularly happy that it did, but you get my meaning. It's a great sequence, and as and the fact that Davison has the precognizance of it before the ship crash lands as well, it means that the whole thing is building. There's an inexorable build towards the inevitability of the end of the story, which is the death of the leading man. So no, well done. So even though I may never love it in the way that it should be loved because of what I had been exposed to prior to that, and the time that I saw Logopolis, which meant it was so momentous for me. And then of course I was an ancient and cynical how old 9-10-year-old when Caves of Androzani was on, so no, it is a very good regeneration, and I can see why Erica would choose it, and it's none of your you shall be killed for just standing around at the end of the story, and I'll zap you with that laser beam. Now go and eat an ice cream and be sad. Right, Caves of Androzani. What a brilliant Doctor Who story. Erica Lear, what a brilliant Doctor Who personage. And I'm glad I finally got around to doing that, because she is one of the earliest people to respond to the call. And as I say, I was slightly, oh, come on, Eric, you've snapped up one of the favourites. I can't think of anybody I would rather have given Peter Davison's last story to than the Uber Davison fan. That is Erica Lear. So thanks to Erica. her Liverpool events and conventions are great. She's a terrific character, so do avail yourself of her and her wares if you can. Her husband Alan will be along to do the Curse of Fenric at some point, so it's not the last we have heard from the Lear household. So we will be hoping that they will let us in again and not shut the doors on me and 50 of my knights as we come to turn up to watch the Curse of Fenric. But that's not imminent, as you know. These I mix up the order of these to mix up the style of stories and to mix up the contributors and to mix up the eras and everything. So we will be doing something completely different next time. I think I'm going for a little bit of black and white, right back to olden times, and then I'll be going forward to some modern Who, and then we'll just keep going in this random quest to find all that is good about Doctor Who, and to celebrate anything good I can squeeze from the nipples. Like the Doctor with the Queen bat. I will squeeze all the goodness from the nipples of any passing Doctor Who story, and sup on the benefits of its goodness. I was going to say it's lactic goodness then, but well, anyway, there we are. I think I've ended on a suitably milky note. And thank you to Erica. Thanks to you for listening. That was the Caves of Androzani. What a classic, wasn't it, Adric? Well, thanks very much indeed for listening to this omnibus edition of Happy Times and Places, which was presented by me, Toby Haydock, with my special guest, Erica Lear, who you can find on Twitter, or X if you insist on doing that, while you eat your Starburst and I eat my opal fruits. She's there on @EricaLear3. I'm grateful to Erica and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Andrew and Lisa, Kat Armitage, John Arnold, Kevin Ashleford, Luke Atkins, James Bell, David Bickley, Will Brooks, Gary Byrne, Robin Bland, Robbie C, Alex Capajoglu, Paul Carnahan, Paul Carrington, Andy Case, Ian Clark, John Curley, Mark Dakin, Rob Dawson, John Elledge, Mark Findlay Smith, Joe Ford, Gary Gillett, Paul Goodridge, Lisa C. Greco, David Green, Fraser Gregory, Paul Gregory, Michael Harvey and Dave Hoskin. The music is by Dave Gates and the artwork by Dylan Patterson. Well, if you would like listening to one of these Toby Haydock's Time Travels podcasts, if you'd like it to feel different next time, maybe you could do so by becoming a patron. You get your name read out on the credits, like what I did with those names just now. I should have said Adric, shouldn't I? Should have listed all those people and then said, and Adric. But anyway, oh well. Just imagine I did. How we'd have all chortled. But yeah, you can become a patron at patreon.com/Toby Haydock. I mean, the name on the credits is just the icing on the cake. The cake is made up of exclusive releases, bonus releases, advance releases. All of these podcasts come out well in advance, some 6 months in advance, and some, like Too Much Information, a couple of episodes ahead usually. And there's also a podcast called Far Too Much Information, which is totally exclusive to patrons, as are the monthly AMAs, Ask Me Anythings, and pictures of my dog, and behind-the-scenes looks at the various Blu-ray and DVD content that I make. So once a box set is out, and you may have watched a documentary I've made, I take you behind the scenes and show you some bits and bobs. So lots of extra stuff there, usually 3 releases per week. So you get bang for your buck, because it's as little as £3 a month. That's the starting price. But look, if you can't or don't want to do the financial thing, that's completely understandable. What you could do is go to Podbean and iTunes and Apple and basically anywhere that you can get this stuff. Even they come out on YouTube now, and give a like, a subscribe, a 5-star rating, and a few lines of review. It just helps to get these things noticed, as does word of mouth. So tell your friends, recommend these. It really just helps it make it worth my while doing all of this. So yeah, support in that way. or on the Patreon, or on kofi.com/Toby Haydock if you fancy buying me, pretending to buy me a coffee, basically. It's just another way of supporting indefensible, of supporting indefensible, self-producing content creators. Oh no, is that what I am now? Am I a content creator? I'm a trained actor reduced to the state of a no, because that makes it sound like I don't like doing these. I like doing these, and they're good fun, and I love the feedback I get from the people on Patreon as well. It's a lovely sort of community there, and we have bits of back and forth and exchange ideas, and it's just a nice place to hang out, and I'm grateful for the opportunity so to do. And I'm all over social media like a rash. At Haydock Podcasts is where you get all the information about these podcasts. You get tip off when they're released and all of that malarkey. But talking of malarkey, my comedy club, Excess Malarkey, also has a Twitter feed. The Twitter feed was gobbled up by Elon Musk and spat out again, except without any followers. So I'm trying to build that back up. So news about the comedy club that I run every Tuesday night in Manchester is at Excess Malarkey on Twitter. And I have my own personal feed that does comedy and Doctor Who and all sorts of other stuff. And that's at Toby Haydock. And I'm Toby.Haydock on Instagram. I have a Facebook page as well, which is all related to the work that I do. I've got a YouTube channel, Toby Haydock, and where else? I'm in my house, but don't come there. But where else am I? I'm sure I'm somewhere. I've got a website, tobyhaydock.com. I'm not on TikTok yet. I'm drawing the line at TikTok, but there has been talk. But let's not get into that right now. As I record this, I'm not on TikTok, and let's keep it that way at least for now, before my life TikToks away in self-expression on far too many social media platforms. But yeah, go and find me on the ones I've just mentioned. That'd be nice. I've just looked at when I made some of these episodes, because I was trying to see if there's anything I needed to say here, because I re-record the beginnings and the endings just to give those of you who listen to everything something a little bit different for deciding to avail yourself of the omnibus. So episode 2 of this I mixed and saved as a file on my birthday. What was I doing on my birthday? On my 49th birthday is when I did episode 2, and then on the 8th of January 2023 I did episode 3, which was 8th of January. I always remember because it's William Hartnell's birthday, Elvis's birthday, and David Bowie's birthday. I'm sorry if I mention that on the podcast. I don't think I do, because that was when I mixed the episodes rather than when I necessarily recorded them. But why was I working on my 49th birthday? Gosh, I must be very committed. But 2023 that was. So a few things have happened since then, haven't they? But one of the things I was wondering was whether Maurice Reeves and Roy Holder, who I consider to have passed away very recently, had died since I recorded these. But no, they'd been dead for a year or two when I recorded this. So, oh dear, tempus fugit, time flies and is very, very cruel. But yeah, so I don't know what to say apart from thinking about some of these actors that were around and still doing things and still on telly, right until the end, pretty much. And I think of being recently departed. I'm talking about them now and realizing how long ago they were. Well, to coin a phrase, it feels different this time. Yikes! But anyway, I'm glad I haven't sort of reinvented Caves of Androzani and decided that because everybody else likes it, I think it's rubbish. I think that was one that I particularly enjoyed, and I hope you did too. And thanks for getting right to the end of an omnibus. But I've noticed that these do get downloaded actually more than some of the others. So some of you maybe wait until you can listen all in one go. And I have to say, when I started doing podcasts, I was told keep them to half an hour. That's all people want. But now I think people go running and people walking dogs and people on long car journeys. You don't want to sort of effectively have to change the cassette. So this is having one long track that can last for a whole journey. So I hope this has got you from, I don't know, Newbury to Glasgow. No, I think you'd probably need the Daleks master plan for that. But anyway, I hope this has got you through your couch to 10K, or your walk with the dog, or just painting the ceiling, or doing the garden. But yeah, if you're on a long journey, I hope you've managed to time this with Journey's End. And, just remember, when you pull up, before you get out of the car, just remember to say Adric.